Hey guys, what is up? We are live. Just about an hour late. No big deal there. On the latest episode of the movie discussion Pocket Dimension. I'm Cole, and that's Jay. And this is where time does not exist. The only thing that matters is film, of course, this dimension. And this week, in keeping with we decided heading in the weeks leading up to Halloween. We thought, tis the season. We'd do maybe some darker type of stuff, which we kicked off with Possession. So some horror and thrillers, etc. And this is a well-known thriller, even for a foreign film. This is a fairly well-known movie.
Mm-hmm.
It has a pretty good reputation. This is The Vanishing from 1988, a Dutch and French production, which of course would several years later get an American remake. And it only just occurred to me now there are a couple times on the show where we did do foreign films and then the next week follow up with the American remake. I don't know if we're going to do that with this one or not, because this is one where the drop off in quality is fairly large. Most people don't have anything good to say about the remake, really. I've never seen it all the way through. I've seen pieces of it. It shows up on TV every once in a while. I've seen pieces. I've never actually seen it start to finish, but it's definitely kind of like one of those prime examples of when people talk about like an American remake, like just totally like taking away everything that was effective about the original. A lot of people use this as an example of that, and we'll get into that stuff. But I mean, primarily, of course, a big change to the ending, of course, is the main thing.
I think I've seen it, but I don't really remember. Maybe I didn't watch it all. It really sucks.
I've seen pieces of it here and there.
It has a decent cast. I think Jeff Bridges is in there, and
Jeff Bridges and Kiefer Sutherland, and I think Sandra Bullock.
Some decent, decent actors in there. So. But yeah, perfect example of don't remake foreign films in English.
Yeah. Or if you're going to, don't make so many freaking changes. Because I guess there were quite a few and stuff. But yeah, I've heard like Jeff Bridges' performance is actually pretty good, and it's just sort of a waste because the script isn't very good. But this one, as I said, it was well known by the time I watched it. This is a film I rented about 6 or 7 years ago, probably, that I rented, brought home, and I'd always heard of it, and I was aware of the remake and the disparity in quality supposedly between the two. People talking, saying how the remake was. People always say, "Watch the original." I thought the remake. It feels like this movie almost originated that phrase. Not really, but that's just how much I heard of it. And it was actually much like when we did Night Watch.
Mm-hmm.
Night Watch was not only I got an American remake, but it was the same director did it. Same thing with The Vanishing, actually.
Really?
Yeah, the director is George Sluizer. He also co-wrote the script. It was based on a novella called The Golden Egg, and by author Tim Krabbe, and he and the director Sluizer adapted the screenplay together. So, but
I did not realize he directed the remake. Wow.
Yeah. And it looks like I think he ran into a lot of the same problems that the other guy did for Night Watch, except in the case of Night Watch, they still managed to make a fairly decent movie in that it was almost a shot-for-shot remake. So little was changed, really. This one,
Night Watch pretty much is shot-for-shot, isn't it? It's
yeah. There's very, very few differences. Like the main thing I can remember from that one is like. And it just speaks to how Danish that film was, the original being Danish, because there's a scene in that movie where the main character and his friend go out drinking, and then they're out later after they've been drinking. They're sort of drunk, and they go into like this park, and there's like a monument to Hans Christian Andersen. There's like a statue, and he goes like, Hans Christian Andersen was an asshole or something like that. Yes, this is Denmark, And that scene, there's no other version of that scene in the American remake, I guess.
Right.
They probably couldn't think of an equivalent to do it. They're like, well, it's not important to the plot. We don't need it. But apart from that, I think like it basically beat for beat follows all the scenes.
I think the remake was just much more polished in that regard.
Sure, yeah.
The Danish had like a gritty feel to it. But yeah, I like both of those. That's kind of an odd time when I like both, like that and what's the Salem's Lot. I like both of those also.
I should give the first one another try, the 1979 ones, because a lot of people do like it. I don't know, might have just been the timing or something. I was just really annoyed when I saw it. But
It probably plays
and the
better
other
in a
thing is, I've
miniseries.
often talked about how much I really liked the 2004 one for whatever reason. Sorry, did I cut out?
No, there you go.
Okay, that's good. No, I guess it's not really a remake. It's just two different versions of the same thing, like two different adaptations of the same thing. But we did Insomnia, and I think both Insomnias are pretty good. I like the original more. People who are interested in that see our episodes on those because they talk about. I like the original Insomnia, but again, I felt like that as American remakes go, that Insomnia, I think that was by Fincher, was pretty good. But yeah, this is one where you always hear about how the remake in no way lives up to the original, and I can believe it. So this always had a really big. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the original's so good. I mean, there's no way to live up to something like that. I was watching a lot of the extra footage on the app Filmstruck.
Oh yeah,
that's actually why I was running a little bit late because I spent so much time watching all the extras. I didn't watch the actual film itself, but lots of great stuff on there. But apparently Stanley Kubrick was a big fan of this film.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. Yeah, he compared it directly to Salem, not Salem's Lot. The Stephen King one he
Shining.
did, The Shining, and he said that he thought this was more effective for being scary than The Shining. I mean, it's a difficult comparison because they're very different movies, but I kind of get where he's coming from. I mean, when people talk about like how this movie scared them or unnerved them, you understand that it's because it comes from a very real place, as opposed to a lot of horror movies and thrillers and stuff that are more either supernatural or just things that are just unrealistic. The fact about this movie is that it's completely realistic. Like it could, like not only is it something that could happen, but it's kind of something that probably has happened and does happen more or less. And that you've got a villain here. And if you wanted to look up sort of a key phrase for anybody that wanted to like analyze the movie, the one that always comes up is like the banality of evil. The idea that we read things and watch things in fiction, and we have our villains and stuff, and usually they're pretty theatrical. They're done in such a way to make them more menacing and interesting. You get a serial killer like, of course, Hannibal Lecter or something like that. Like, as far as we know, no serial killer has even been close to somebody like Hannibal Lecter. And usually when we think of these serial killers in these movies, they're always very dangerous and cunning and stuff. And I mean, not to say that the real life ones aren't, but it's kind of a different thing. Like, you look up a lot of the most infamous serial killers that have actually existed, and then you look up how they were arrested. It's usually very, we won't to repeat the word banal. It's usually very boring, really. It's like, okay, once they finally figured out who they were, the cops went and arrested them without incident. It's usually how it goes. Whereas in a lot of this stuff, like the shows like Criminal Minds or a lot of things, it's usually very different. They send in the SWAT team to take out the dangerous killer, but the killer has like traps or something. That almost never pretty much happens in real life. You have these guys that have racked up considerable body counts. They are dangerous. They are menacing, but there's still a limit to it. Whereas in this, it's much more realistic. We have a dangerous, menacing killer, but wrapped up in a very average, ordinary package, which is really the reality of it most of the time. I mean, every once in a while in history, you do have some real life villains in history that do fit that. Somebody like, I don't know, Charles Manson, for instance. Even though he never even, as far as I know, killed anybody himself, but he's got the wild eyes and everything, so he fits. And I don't know, Attila the Hun maybe or something like that. But for the most part, a lot of like history's greatest monsters were like, if you look at them, they just seem like ordinary, almost pitiful type people. You look at somebody like Stalin, who was responsible for so much death and suffering and destruction. I mean, he was more or less kind of like a petty bureaucrat with too much power. That, like, I mean, it shows what power is, but I mean, at the same time, he's not killing people by lining them up and chopping their heads off himself. He's killing them with the stroke of a pen, which is how it goes with a lot of these things. But when you get into real life serial killers that you are hands on, even then, all the ones that have done the despicable, horrifying things, they're dangerous, but again, they're dangerous within certain conditions, and that they would sneak up behind their victim or lure their victim. It wasn't like they could just attack somebody head on, or they were brilliant hand to hand combat, or although they often usually are, again, in fiction and TV and movies and stuff like that. they're just dangerous at all
Yeah.
times. Whereas,
Well, yeah, rarely do you have someone that has just a massive body count that they don't look crazy. People usually say like, "Oh man, I can't believe he was such a
mhm,
normal guy."
very
That's how
normal and non-threatening.
they get away with it, is they appear
Yeah,
normal.
and that's how it is with our killer
Mm-hmm.
in this movie. It really hammers home just sort of how ordinary he is, and it also hammers home. And I think this is what people find chilling is like there's definitely people like that in the world right now out there, and they're very hard to detect. When he's talking about himself, he said, I had a defect or whatever in my personality, my makeup that was pretty much undetectable to everybody around me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing about a lot of these psychopaths, sociopath types is they're actually aware of what they are. They figure it out. They're like, oh, I don't have empathy or whatever, but they're very good at masking it and faking it. I mean, not to jump around too much, but there's a scene in the movie where I think it shows him at home with his family, and that's another thing. He's a family man, which always throws people off. People always seem to feel that's the other thing. They always look out for and it's true. There's counterparts in real life of, the single guy that is lonely and weird and stuff, and certainly there are real life parallels to that. Somebody like Ed Gein, for instance. Sure, he was a weird, lonely guy. He was
Mm-hmm.
kind of off-putting and strange, but there's also been serial killers that were uh, again, they had actually wife and kids and
Yeah.
co-workers, and they were successful. And that's what this guy is. And there's a scene where I think he's celebrating his birthday with his family, and we see this guy has a really good life. Like he's
Yeah.
successful, he's fairly affluent, he's got a family that loves him, and then they sort of zoom in on like them sort of like hugging and holding him, and he's smiling. But it's a really good job of the actor because you can sort of see behind the smile that like it doesn't do anything for him. Like
Right.
it does, like he's not happy from it. And
Well,
you can begin to understand a little bit of why he feels the need to go to these extremes is because the
yeah.
things that most people would find fulfilling, it's nothing to him. He doesn't get anything out of it.
It's a very odd situation because you almost like the killer more than you do the boyfriend Rex, because he's a more likable character, in that regard. As far as he's a nice guy, Rex is a bit of an asshole, like pretty often.
I guess so, but I mean, most of the movie we see Rex is, his true devotion to his. Was it his wife? In the translation I watched, he calls her his wife, but then
Yeah.
later, the media and people say it was his friend, even though it was obviously a romantic relationship. Like it ends on a shot of like when it mentions his disappearance. The newspaper headline says, and this isn't a translation thing because I can read French. It says like disappears 3 years after his friend. Spoilers. Uh,
If you have,
you cannot do this one without massive spoilers, people. I mean, that's how we do the show anyway. But this is obviously a movie that builds to a rather important climax, and there's no way to discuss the movie properly without getting into that too. But yeah, but I just mean, I didn't really feel like he was an asshole because basically you saw how devoted he was. He'd ruined his finances. He'd basically ruined his life in just trying because he couldn't forget her, because he couldn't let go, because he needed to find her, needed closure. Yeah, so he run his finances into the ground. He destroyed his relationship with his newest girlfriend. And then eventually he does give his own life, all
mhm.
in the pursuit of finding out what happened. So I don't know. I found him pretty sympathetic and mostly likable. I mean, he has that scene at the very beginning where he's kind of a jerk, but he does apologize for it.
Right, right. That's kind of what I was talking about. He not only leaves her there, he just starts walking, and she's like begging him not to leave, and
Yeah.
she's crying out, and the camera shows his face, and he gives a little smirk, like he's happy, like he's getting a kick out of leaving her there.
Yeah, I mean, he does leave her in a dangerous situation.
Oh,
I
very
mean,
dangerous. Yeah.
I mean, I would hope, and this movie's 1988. I would hope that by now there are no such things as tunnels that don't have like some sort of lighting in them. Like the idea that you just drive into a tunnel and it's complete blackness, and the only light you have is what you bring with you. That just
Mhm.
seems extremely dangerous. It's like for the exact reason that happened. They're driving into the tunnel, they run out of gas, the car is dead, they have no light, so any cars coming into the tunnel can't see them except with their own headlights. But I guess it's
Right.
still kind of a dangerous situation.
And
But yeah, it's a real jerk thing to do. It looks like the type of thing that would almost end relationships, and yet
yeah.
he apologizes and she forgives him, and they move on. But maybe that's just to show how resilient the relationship truly is, that it could survive such a thing, because a lot of relationships wouldn't. That would be the end of it. You left me in that tunnel, like, fuck you, it's over. So maybe that was the point of showing that, maybe to show how resilient it was, that it could even survive him doing such a terrible thing.
Let me ask you this: the blue truck, the blue like delivery, I guess, 18-wheeler type truck, is that any significance, do you think? Because that shows up there at the tunnel, and it also shows up at the gas station. I think a couple times it shows it at the gas station.
I remember from the gas station. Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing it at the gas station. I don't think I actually remembered, now that you say it, that it was the truck that was in the tunnel. You think I would have caught that?
It was the first one that
it was ran, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it means anything, or if they just had a truck and wanted to use it.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. It's possible, though. Maybe it's just something it didn't occur to me. I don't, like I said, I don't think I noticed that it was the truck from the tunnel, but it makes sense. But I remember the truck clearly, because, like you said, it makes definitely, even besides that, it makes at least a couple more appearances, and I remember it very clearly from the rest stop area. Some sort of delivery truck or something, hauling stuff.
And then we get some flashbacks to the killer practicing. How her what's his name in the film? I can't remember his character's name. Raymond.
Yes, Raymond.
And that's like really the creepiest thing to me, is the way he just goes through the motions of how he's going to do this. He
again, it's very mundane, and I like the music that's playing when he's it's just very pleasant, ordinary music. Because that's really what the movie's hammering home again. Like, it's not trying to set us up with sinister music, or him in a darkened basement sharpening knives, or any of that stuff. It's just like, oh, he's a guy. He's made this plan. Now he's just sort of practically sort of going about how he would do it. And you get to see some of his trial runs, and they don't work out too well. But at the same time, he still does have a certain intelligence about him, because even when he's failing, there's only one time where the supposed victim is in any way really suspicious. Like, he's smart enough to understand when he has the exchange with the woman or whoever, that it's not going to work. Like, he doesn't pursue it further. He knows not to say something incriminating, or of course try to grab her or anything like that. Like, he realizes the moment has passed. His window's closed. He doesn't have it. He lets it go. The only time it really comes close is when he's doing the trial run of the whole thing that he would eventually try out at the rest stop area, of course, although that's not what wound up working, which was the whole idea of pretending to be injured. Or no, this is before that. So yeah, this is where he gets the idea. So first it's just needing assistance to hitch a trailer thing to the car, and he realizes that it's a pretty thin facade, because it's like, why can't you do that? Like, the woman's suspicious of it. She goes back and tells her husband. He's like, what do you want with my wife? He's like, well, I need help with this. Like, why the hell would you need help with this? And the husband knows right off, like, there's something not right here, because clearly you could do that. And he says something like, I realized what needed to be done was I couldn't make hitching it harder, so I had to weaken myself. And that's where he comes up with the idea of, well, if I have an injury, which again takes from real life, because that's infamously how Ted Bundy was very successful.
That's what I was going to say.
A lot of his victims, he would do the fake the injury thing. And that way, they would not only see him as non-threatening, but also it would give him an excuse why he would need help with something, and have them get close. And it worked very well for him. And of course, they even used it in Silence of the Lambs. That's how Buffalo Bill kidnaps the senator's daughter, putting on the whole fake injury thing to get her guard down and lure her in. So, and what's funny is, that's like his that's the plan he's going to implement the day that Rex and his girlfriend are at the truck stop or rest stop. And yet, once again, just because of fate or whatever, in a sort of funny way, it doesn't wind up working. Like, he goes around, it looks like he has a girl that's very willing to go with him. And it's like, oh, like, because at first he wasn't even going to tell her to get in the car. He was going to meet her somewhere else. And she said, well, I can get in the car. And he's thinking, great. And then he then he winds up sneezing into the rag with the chloroforms himself partially, and realizes his head's swimming. He has to get the hell out of there. and then he just gets sort of a stroke of really good luck, which leads him to Rex's wife. But that's another thing that's nice. I think we talked about this before. Is like in most movies when they show people getting chloroformed, it's not at all realistic. Like you can't just put some on a rag and put it in front of somebody's face and bring them down. You have to really be meticulous about it. Chloroform affects different people based on their weight and stuff. So you really have to measure out the right amount for like how much that person's weighs, and then you just sort of have to allow for other things too. It's almost impossible to just take somebody out and have them go out in like a few seconds unless you have the exact right dosage. And if you go overboard, you'll give them like brain damage. So it's something that has to be very meticulously figured out, and it shows him doing that. And he's what is he? He's a professor of like chemistry, so he knows a little bit of stuff like that. So it shows him like working out the math, I assume, based on like what he thinks maybe people weigh and stuff and how much to use.
Mm-hmm.
And that's again like in another movie, I guess it could be played for laughs. Oh, he chloroformed himself. He should collapse. But no, he's larger than the woman, and he didn't get a full face full of it either. So it just probably made his head swim a little bit, made him a little dizzy. So he just had to go to the bathroom and get himself back together. And then it's coming out of the bathroom there that he happens upon oh man, there's not too many Saskia, which is, Saskia, I love that name too. I think Saskia is an awesome name. Yeah, so they're a Dutch couple who are on a trip through France. During the Tour de France, you can hear a lot of radio stuff about it. And later in the later in the movie, he when they're having the conversation, he even talks about get it wrong. It's like, come to this spot, you can see where a perfect spot for them when they're coming by. You want to see when one of the racers is going to make his move. So yeah, it's the Tour de France that's going on during that.
Yeah, I think Rex is actually like an amateur.
The cyclist. Yeah. They both brought bikes. They've got bikes on their car, so they were going to do a little bit of cycling, bike riding, just for the fun of it. But we get some really. So the structure of the movie is very interesting for a thriller because it sort of defies convention. Because what you have is, okay, you open with your protagonists, they have their little thing, and then you have the disappearance.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we do is we cut to, and it shows us exactly who did it, and it shows his plans leading up to it. So it's very open in that way. And yet the movie still builds suspense. It still keeps us in the dark about like the one thing. It's like, what did he actually do to her? Which is really what drives Rex. Is like he just needs to know. And I can understand that to a certain extent, but the other thing, it's like, well, you really need. Obviously, he killed her because after he got her, she's been gone. It's been 3 years and there's no sign of her. He must have killed her, but he seems to really need to know like how did it happen, and that's what drives him. Which I can sort of understand. I know that there's certain people who would take issue with that and say, well, why would you put yourself in that situation? It's like, and there's even a part where he almost doesn't go through with it, right? Where he just says, I know enough. I don't need to know the rest. I know enough. I can leave. And yet then just he wrestles with it a little bit, and then he just sort of like, to hell with it.
That's what Raymond was anticipating, that he would be so captivated, to know how it happened and the details. Because I mean, he easily could have gone to the police and said, "Hey, look, this guy right here."
But as he says, like, you don't really have anything
right.
concrete on me. We've had these conversations, but it's been 3 years. You can't physically link me to her or her body or anything like that. And, like, he brings up a few things. He's like, I have a photograph that you're in. Like, no, if you did, you would have taken it to the police. He's talking about like fingerprints on the coins. It's like, well, again, that was 3 years ago. Who knows where the coins are now?
And I held them by the edges.
I probably would have held them by the edges because I would have thought of that. But probably that's just him bluffing because he knows it's stupid anyway. Because in the aftermath of the kidnapping, when he goes to see the guy, when he talks about seeing the cops, he says, well, okay, we have to get a hold of all the coins so we can fingerprint them. The guy's like, you must be kidding. Because it's just, there's no way they're going to do that, or that it would even be really helpful. I mean, for one thing, like getting fingerprints off coins, they've been handled by so many people.
Right.
How are you supposed to get one definitive print? And of course, the other thing is you need a database that actually has it. And Raymond's not in any database.
Right.
Certainly not. he's not, as we know, he's not like a guy that's ever been in prison or anything like that. He's a ordinary, upstanding citizen with a family and a job who no criminal record whatsoever. So
we don't even know that he got a coffee. So,
yeah.
we don't even know that he put change in a machine. So,
I mean, we see her doing it because
mm-hmm.
when he does meet, like, again, it's just finally some good luck for him in that he had these he's had these attempts that didn't work out, and he was just coming off another failure where he couldn't probably believe his bad luck, and that like everything was going perfectly, and then he sneezed and ruined it on himself, and yet he doesn't even we see earlier that he noticed Saskia, like she appealed to him, but he didn't approach her. She winds up approaching him because she wants to get some proper change for the machine, and so they do exchange a few coins here and there, but yeah. There'd be no way to sort out the coins and the fingerprints and stuff. But
this whole thing would never happen because there would be CCTV everywhere.
Exactly.
It would all be recorded, multiple angles.
Especially at a rest stop like that. I mean, there's a lot of people. It's hard, but there would still probably be some definitive shots that would. As he says, there's nothing to tie me to that, and he's right. But nowadays there would be. It's like you would have been on some camera somewhere. Some camera would have caught you. What's funny is circling back to another moment to one of his aborted attempts, another one that goes very poorly when he's before he's even figured out the area, where first he's in the city trying to ask people directions to like a drugstore or something like that. And one of the women he approaches turns out to recognize him. He doesn't remember her, but and she realizes that he's up to something, but I think she probably thinks he's trying to have an affair. So she gives him the idea. She says, if you want to pick up girls, you should go out to that rest stop area. It's full of tourists, and there's no chance anybody will recognize you. Like, she tells him that directly because she thinks, probably he's looking to have an affair. She doesn't think he's, a murderer who's going to kidnap people. So she actually gives him the idea, which is, again, sort of darkly funny. There's a bit of dark humor in this movie, which you have to respect. It's done fairly well. And that's one that I like, that like this woman just flat out tells him the best plan for abducting a woman, not really realizing that that's what he means to do.
Wow. Yeah. Because they're foreign.
Yeah, it's part of European society. It's actually brought up a few times as if it's for our benefit, just to let us know, because there's one part where one of his daughters notices that he's been acting a little weird, and she's like, "Do you have a mistress?" And he's like, and she's like, "Well, you're old enough, and I assume you've earned it, because it's just such a normal thing. You probably have a mistress, don't you, Dad?" And he's like, he doesn't tell her. He just sort of smirks at her. And then there's the part where he's talking to his own wife about stuff, and he says, the only Frenchman who's proud to say he's only known one woman. He's talking about his wife, which, as far as we know, is true, because the whole thing about unlike a lot of these murderers, there's no real sexual component beyond the fact that he wants his victims to be women. But that also has to do with them also just being easier victims. But he does have a certain code to this too, because he even points out something because he's talking about the challenge of getting a woman in a car. He said, it would be easy, of course, with prostitutes.
Right.
A prostitute will get into your car, almost no questions asked. He said, but I didn't want something that easy. And he said, the other thing is nobody cares when prostitutes goes missing, which is exactly why lots of killers do prey on them. They're not only are they easy targets, but also they don't have family or whatever. There's not much police follow through and stuff like that. And he specifically didn't want that. He said, I wanted to take somebody that would be missed. I wanted, it to matter.
That's what he's getting off on. It's not a sexual thing, which, 9 times out of 10 it is.
Yeah.
So it's he's the whole cat and mouse thing he's playing with Rex is kind of what's doing it for him. So
yeah, it's the power and the idea that he can take away somebody from somebody. And it's interesting how he got to this epiphany again. So he'd realized at a certain age that he was a sociopath, and for the most part didn't have empathy or the normal feelings we have. But he was a little different from others in that he admits that later he's out with his family and he winds up saving a young girl from drowning. And he said that did make him feel good. In fact, the whole point was that in his life, he didn't really feel things. He felt something when he defied fate when he was 16 and just jumped off the balcony for no reason and injured him. That made him feel something. And then he didn't feel something again until he felt sort of the rush saving somebody. So you could say, well, wait a second, if he's a psychopath, like, why would he care about saving a girl? But I understand it, because again, it was sort of a life or death thing. He saved a life, and he got the high from that, and his family, of course, and everyone was really grateful, and he enjoyed that. And he thought at that moment, it's interesting, he said, so I thought, I want to know if it would feel just as good to do kind of the opposite. So I thought of the worst act of evil I could do, and I wanted to see if that would feel the same, and that's the difference. That's why he's a psychopath. Saving somebody or killing them both feel equally good to him in a way, and neither really means much to him, like from like an empathy point of view. Like, he saves the girl, but he's not happy really for the girl that she'll get to go live her life. It's just about how he felt being the hero saving her. Just like, he's happy to kill people because he's in no way cares about the people that miss them. In fact, he's glad that they're missed. That makes him feel important and powerful again. So it's interesting and somewhat more realistic than a lot of these, villains and serial killers who get in movies. And I'm going to return this again and again, but this is really why I classify this as a very scary or disturbing movie, despite the fact that it's not like full of, grisly violence or anything like that. It's just because the realization that it's very real and that it could happen and it has happened and it will happen in the future. And that right now there's, people just like this out there, and we can't really detect them because they're very smart and they're very good at fitting into, and most people find it so scary and they'll put it on lists of like scary movies, and it seems to stick out like a sore thumb when you compare it to those scary movies. But that's what scares people and unnerves them. It's just because it reminds them that in real life this kind of thing could happen, and that such people exist.
How is someone capable of doing that?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, right. And exactly, that's the other thing, right? Like, it's a mindset. Normal people, we can objectively look at it, but we can't really fathom it or understand it. Our brains and feelings and stuff don't work that way. We can't put ourselves in that position, because we have those feelings and stuff. So, and that again, it's very chilling to know that people that just don't have that component, that emotion, that conscience or whatever you call it, that the people were out there, and there's quite a few of them. And the fact is what I think we talked about before. It's like, for the most part, luckily, most of them don't go to that extreme. But that doesn't mean they still don't cause damage. A lot of the sociopaths people meet are the people that, like, they cause a lot of damage and hurt, but in different ways. Usually about, like, if you're working in an office or something, maybe they'll decide to destroy you because you're in their way and they want to ascend, to a higher position in the office. That happens all over the place. But luckily it's only a rare, small percentile that will go to the extra length of hurting people physically and, killing them. But they do exist. And one thing you get a sense from when the movie is over, that, like, he's had a 3-year gap since he's killed anybody, and now he's done it again. It's like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing this. It's kind of what, it's like, I'm pretty good at this. I'm going to do this again. This is what works for me. So again, a very, very chilling ending note for sure too.
Yeah, I mean, they actually shot an alternative ending, which they've never shown. It was actually show the cops catch up with him at the end. So
yeah,
that's kind of good. I think it's better to leave it open ended.
Well, logically, I don't even see how that would work, because everything he says is pretty much right. Like, yes, here I am sort of admitting it openly to you, but you haven't told anybody. You haven't recorded and even if, like, because he could go to the cops and say, "Oh, this guy, he's come to me and he told me that he did it." All he has to do is deny it. It's his word against his, and as he said, there's nothing to tie me to it. There's no physical evidence or anything like that. So he's thought this through. That's why he's decided to do it, and that's what makes him sort of different from a lot of these killers too. Is that he successfully got away with the crime, but that wasn't enough for him. He had to contact Rex and let him know, I'm the one that did it. And toy with him a bit, saying, "Come meet me," and then he would come and he would watch him, but he wouldn't go. and he just
Mhm.
enjoyed seeing Rex show up all the time. He realized that he was really unraveling, even though even though he was supposedly moving on with his life, new relationship, and stuff like that. As we see, Rex never really moved on. He just wasn't capable. And I can understand that because people that have like family members that were, whether they were murdered or even if something like, I don't know, lost at sea or something like that, the loss is obviously crushing, but the thing that really drives them nuts is a lack of closure.
Mhm.
They're gone, like 99.9% sure, pretty sure they're dead, but that like 1% and just not the not knowing, just I can understand completely how that would haunt you and
Right.
eat away at you day after day, just never knowing. And often knowing isn't really good, because if you find out, oh yeah, they were murdered and they suffered horribly and they cried out for you and you weren't there, like that's a horrible thing to know. But there
Mhm.
is some small part of most people, it's true, where we just need to know, even when we know it's not good for us. It's a revelation that happens in a lot of fiction and movies too, right? It's just like, don't keep looking for answers. You might not like what you find and stuff, but that person still keeps looking anyway, because it's like, damn it, I need to know the truth. So like, I think that is a pretty common trait in a lot of people, even when it can be damaging to yourself. It's just like, well, it's still important to know the truth, even if it hurts. And this is kind of the ultimate example. He's willing to go all the way for it, in
Mhm.
that he winds up, sharing her fate.
Reunited in death.
Yeah, in the actual novella, there's actually a scene in, I guess, his mind where he sort of like hallucinates it or sees a vision of it sort of before he dies, them sort of reuniting. So the original story was called, what was it, the Golden Egg or something like that,
Mhm.
and yeah, the Golden Egg, and that is discussed in the movie early on, because when he and Sasuke are originally driving, she talks about having sort of a recurring dream where she's sort of floating through space, and what is it? She gets enclosed in this golden egg, and then she sees like far off some other golden egg approach her or something like that. I can't quite remember, but you can see how it applies to the plot quite well, especially by the end. It's sort of like, because they both wind up dying in the same fashion, where they're closed off in something, and supposedly, if you believe in that kind of stuff, reunited after death.
Mhm. And he's obviously claustrophobic also. So.
Yeah, and that's another thing. If you pay attention to, you see how it lines up, because when they're driving to the rest stop and they get pulled over from the cop for suppose, I'm amazed the cop could see this, considering it was nighttime. But the cop pulled them over because he was driving without wearing a seatbelt, and then he actually showed the cop that he actually had a doctor's note to not wear it, because he said he suffered from severe claustrophobia. And then it all makes sense, because originally when he was talking about how, when he first conceived of the idea of committing the ultimate act of evil, he had to think about what he thought would be the worst thing to do to a person was. Well, obviously he's a claustrophobic person, so the worst thing he could think of was being buried alive. So you
Mhm.
can connect the dots there. It's kind of neat. It would definitely be a big. It's one of the worst things for me too. That's right up on my list. I'm claustrophobic like that. Like I'm not. I'm only claustrophobic in the severe. So like I don't mind crowds. I can be in an elevator. It's only once I can't like move. We talked about this before when we talked about some of the like those cave
Sure.
movies, like The Descent and stuff. Like
Yeah. Uh,
I will never like crawl through something, because I'm just terrified that I will get stuck. I will lose my mind if I get stuck.
I think that's a
Like,
basic human fear. Because I mean, you're incapacitated completely.
yeah, just
So,
all rationality would fly out the window for me. I'd be hysterical if I was like in some like cave and crawling and suddenly was stuck.
I
So I
remember.
didn't put myself in that position. I remember our friend Mike said like, oh yeah, he had to squeeze through. He'd done some of that cave stuff, and he would squeeze through some areas. It would get a little tough, but I'd squeeze through. I'd be like, I would never even attempt it.
Yeah. You, you wind up like James Franco having to chop one of your arms off.
Yeah, this is way before I knew about that. As you said, I think for a lot of people, it's sort of like a basic human instinct to like to avoid that. But then again, I mean, there's plenty of things that other people have a fear of that I would totally go for. The main thing for me is heights. Like a lot of people are like, I just wouldn't go up there. But I totally would go up there. I kind of get a rush from heights. I really enjoy it. I understand the danger and stuff, but I don't know. I still feel confident. I feel like I'll be okay. But in that sort of situation, like again, it's like because as Mike said, in those situations, it was possible to get through, but you had to sort of wriggle through and be calm. I would not be calm, so I would be stuck. Like so, it might be a situation for yes, if I moved in the right way, I could be free, but it's almost like no chance of me doing that because I'm not calm. I'm not thinking rationally. I'm just panicking. So yeah.
I'm not necessarily claustrophobic, but yeah, if I was in a coffin, I would not be.
Yeah,
I would
well,
not be okay.
I don't think anybody would really feel comfortable in that. You know, we've seen a few movies where various characters have gotten out of that, but realistically, you can't.
I wouldn't think so.
Like, even if you manage to put a hole in it, all you're doing is filling up with dirt.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how much air do you have? How long is your air going to last?
A normal human can't get out there. You need super strength. If you had super strength, sure. If you were Iron Fist, you could summon the Iron Fist and go and shatter it and climb up. But
well, I mean, are we talking 6 feet? 6 feet down?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a human on Earth that can get out of that.
As I said, yeah, a real human being. Yeah, there's no getting out of it. You know, in Kill Bill, she gets out, but using a mythical martial arts technique that doesn't exist in real life. Like a 1-inch punch thing.
Oh, right.
Remember, she does her 1-inch punch over and over again. But again, even if you could summon that kind of strength, all you're doing is letting a whole bunch of dirt in. You're not going to break it in such a way that everything will go like this. It's just going to, dirt's going to come in on you and you'll just die quicker.
Got a lot of factors that would be involved in that. I'd like to see what Mythbusters have to say.
They must have done an episode.
Yeah, they probably did, and then they did a lot of stupid things. So.
They must have.
I just think
that's a hard experiment. It's hard to do as a controlled experiment, though. What's a safe way to bury somebody alive?
And what kind of? Well, yeah, totally. I guess you could measure, 6 feet down by so and so dimensions. How much? What's the weight of that? Mm-hmm. There's no way. It would be tons, right? It would be tons.
Yeah, because mathematically, like the force that you need, yeah.
It's no way that you could.
It's a pretty sure way of killing somebody. I mean, there's lots of sure ways of killing somebody, but if you want to be elaborate and dramatic, it takes a lot of work, but it's going to work. You bury them, they're not coming up.
And like maybe if you had an oxygen tank and it was in sand or something, because that's the thing, you have to do it quick. You have to do it quickly because
there's a whole movie that I haven't seen where it's like almost the whole movie remembers the guy in it. I've never seen it. I can't remember what it's called.
Daredevil. I mean, God damn it, Deadpool is in it.
Ryan Reynolds, right? Yeah, I didn't see it, but maybe I should now. Not just because I'm curious about the situation.
It was not that good, but it is interesting. I mean, it's like.
I'm not really a fan of those. I'm not really a fan of those single location movies. I mean, there's a few, but not many. But they were kind of a thing in the 2000s.
It's like do it.
There's There's the one where people are stuck on a chairlift. There's like that first one with the sharks. I think they even made that one.
Was it Open Water?
Yeah, Open Water. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of those sort of single location things where like people are stuck in one little spot and they have to survive.
Well, you need good dialogue for one thing. You need good actors that can pull it off. Yeah. Because you can have a lot of time filled with nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
If you're making a feature.
I mean, there's definitely a few classics, and I mean, this one maybe bends the rules a bit because it's a lot of characters in one spot. But the Hitchcock thriller Lifeboat, because that's one that it's in the lifeboat, but there's quite a few characters in the lifeboat. So there's a lot of room for stuff to happen and people to talk and stuff. So I haven't seen that in quite a few years, but I'll have to revisit that too. But yeah, a lot of those single. But just because of the specific situation of being buried alive interests me. Maybe I should watch the Ryan Reynolds one, whatever the hell it's called. I'll have to look it up because I can't remember. Probably called Buried Alive or Buried. I don't know.
I think it may be Buried. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I think is it like Al Qaeda or someone that buries him? It's either Al Qaeda or the cartel.
Oh, it's a terrorist group. Okay. The cartel, yeah.
Yeah, Buried. Orc says it's called Buried
Well, you can take that to the bank. Thanks, Orc.
because you guessed it. God knows you can't leave anybody guessing on what that movie's about.
That's true. Maybe that's why they didn't want to call this one the Golden Egg. They're like, that's too confusing.
Yeah, I agree. That's not a good title.
Yeah. So it's yeah, its original title is how do you say it?
Spoorloos.
Yeah, which roughly translates into traceless.
Mm-hmm.
And crap, I had another one. Oh yeah, the French title is something like L'homme qui veut savoir or something like that, which basically means the man who wanted to know. That's the French
Oh,
title.
really?
Yeah. So yeah. So this is shit. I just dropped my cat, kind of, on this can and spilled it. I have to clean up a spill in a second. But what was I going to say? I'll come right back and then we'll talk about it. I was going to say, yes, I hadn't seen this movie in almost 10 years, and I've forgotten how even though I was, I think of it as a Dutch movie, the main character is Dutch, but most of the action takes place in France, and our villain
Right.
is French. So actually, about 75% of the dialogue is actually in French. And it's one of the movies, I don't know, movies, it just varies for me how well I can understand them. This is a movie where just, maybe it's because it also involves foreigners speaking French, like Saskia. In fact, there's a whole point in it where when Saskia is asking Raymond for the change when they first meet, she asks him, they're in France, so she asks him in French, do you speak French? And he says, oh, I am French. And then she's actually, you can tell that she's pleased to have somebody to practice French with. She's like sort of trying it out on him, and you can see that you can see through the subtitles and stuff if you can't speak French that like some of it's a bit off. Like she's searching for the words and she's not getting it right, and he's just sort of, I don't know. He's not helping her very much. At one point, he helps her. Most of the part, he's just sort of like smiling at her, watching her struggle for the words. But maybe that's just part of his character because he's an evil sociopath.
Yeah, that was lost on me. I didn't even make that connection.
No, yeah, yeah. When he's talking to Saskia, she's clearly struggling, but she's also happy. She's pleased with the opportunity to be able to speak some French. In fact, before they even get there, she shows off a bit of French in the car, where they're just talking, and then she starts talking about how she sees a tree. That line where she's saying how she can see a tree.
Okay.
That's when
Okay.
she switches over to French. There, you can just tell she's happy. She's like, I'm speaking French. Here, listen to my French.
I didn't know why she kept saying that. I was like, what am I missing here? Okay. Okay.
Okay,
That makes sense.
so you can't tell how they sound different.
Not in that regard. I didn't.
Okay,
I mean, I can usually tell what French sounds like, but
yeah,
I don't speak it, so
yeah. Well, I just mean there's several languages that obviously I don't speak, but I can recognize what they
yeah.
sound like when you hear them. I figured French and Dutch isn't too hard because Dutch is more harsh like German, whereas French, is the more flowing, romantic thing like a Spanish or Italian or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's true. If you speak French like haltingly, it can sound kind of, it's a little harder. If you're not speaking French the way like a French speaker would, if you speak it like haltingly, then it can, you could definitely mix it up. And she does do that a few times. There's parts where she's searching for the right word. And again, it's kind of funny, and I think they're just trying to show Raymond's character a little bit, is that he doesn't help her. He just sort of watches her struggle. Like he's kind of amused by the fact that she can't get the right words. But there's a few parts where she's like, because when he tells her, he makes up the lie really quick when she sees the keychain. She wants to be able to buy a keychain that has like the R on it for Rex, and she's saying how she can't find the word for buy, acheter. She wants to say that she wants to buy it, but she's just trying to say, she's like, I want very much, I want to, something like that. Like he's not helping her out at all. He just like lets her stumble until she recalls the word. Anyway, if you can entertain the masses for 2 seconds,
Sure.
I need a paper towel to wipe up a mess. Be right back.
Sure. So I wanted to mention this film is interesting because they finished making the film and it's kind of just sat there for like a year. They couldn't find a distributor, so it wasn't until the film was in a film festival. There happened to be a spot, and they asked the director, um, you know, where's that film you're talking about making? And we'll put it in the festival. We have a spot for it. So they did that, and it won best film in the festival. So that's kind of what started the actual success of the film, because otherwise it would have been like completely unknown, because it went to Cannes and went and left, and really nothing came out of that. They couldn't get a distributor, so that's when it really started to become a pretty popular film. Then guys like Stanley Kubrick, we mentioned earlier, he discovered the film and really liked the film quite a bit. As Cole said earlier, he said it was the scariest film he's ever seen. Much more successful at that than The Shining. So that I thought was really interesting, because it's it's Criterion release. It's one of the more popular Criterion releases, I think. It's one of the that I own.
Didn't want to have my floor get all sticky.
No problem. Yeah, I was just mentioning how it very easily could have just disappeared, because it went for a year without any distribution.
Yeah, and luckily it did get picked up, and in '91, I think 3 years later, it got a limited American release, and I guess by then, it really caught on and started to get its reputation, because this was one that I was well aware of, and that's why I sought it out and rented it, because it was one that, I don't know, probably by then I'd be looking on the internet and people would be like mentioning it on lists of like thrillers, saying like, oh, this is a very, chilling, effective sort of thriller movie, but in a different way than a lot of them. And I totally agree. It's really effective at what it's doing. It's telling a different sort of story, more real life, more mundane, but still in a very suspenseful fashion. And as I said, I find the structure of the movie interesting too, because it goes against normal convention there, in that even though it's still withholding the ultimate secret to the end, so that we're still in we're in Rex's shoes. It's interesting because we start off in Rex's shoes. We're at the rest stop area with him when she just disappears, and we don't see what happens at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We stay with Rex, so we just get his confusion and bewilderment and how upset he is and stuff like that. And then it cuts back and shows us some stuff to teach us about Raymond. We know that Raymond did it, but we didn't see Raymond do it. That's still saved for the end. But so it's not a whodunit. It lets us know who did it, but it still withholds enough information to keep us guessing to the end, like exactly what happened. And that's so we're sort of in Rex's shoes, like just not knowing and needing to know very badly.
Yeah, I like that. Once he realizes that she's missing, and not just in the restroom or something, like you can really feel his terror that he's trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah, there we go.
It's shot really well too. I think the film in general is shot really well. And before I forget, I want to just mention the soundtrack is very good also.
Yeah, I liked the musical choices, as I said, because there were a few scenes, particularly things with Raymond, where I think a different director or filmmaker might have made a choice to make the music more dark or sinister.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't do that. And it's effective because, again, it highlights just how he's sort of an ordinary guy by all accounts on the outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I said, probably the best is when he's rehearsing the whole trying to get a woman to his car thing.
Right.
The music's actually quite pleasant during that, and we see that he's sort of stumbling through it, and there's a bit of dark humor in there, as we said, but he has a very sinister and nefarious purpose, is to kidnap somebody to ultimately murder. But the music is it keeps with, it's sort of a bright sunny day, and the music just sort of keeps with that feeling. It doesn't turn sinister or anything like that. So I appreciate the movie because in a lot of movies, they're very kind of manipulative to the audience in trying to tell us, how we're supposed to feel and react to a scene by especially with the music, it's like, dun, dun, dun. Okay. Things are really scary now. They're up to something bad, and this movie doesn't do that at all, which is nice.
Yeah. I like the opening. It's almost just like a bass guitar.
Mm.
And it's just like a single string playing that note. I think is what it is. You'd be more familiar with it than I would. I'm not a musician. And then there's another really like chaotic scene that has saxophones
Yeah,
going on, which is really simple, but really effective also.
yeah. The music really fits.
Hmm. It's unique, much like the film itself.
Yeah, I was trying to find something and I lost it. Oh yeah, there's a few things about the name, like Raymond's last name, because the story was Dutch. He talked to I can't remember who it was, but he talked to somebody who was French. I'm trying to remember to find out how to change the names from the French. So some of the names are kind of on the nose, and like Raymond's last name is what is it, Lamorne or something like that. Should I
That's what
had it, but
he's.
anyway, it basically would translate into something like the gloomy one, which is kind of funny, or yeah, like the gloomy one, or the sad one, or maybe the dark one, or something, which is kind of a yeah, Lemorne. Yeah, it's kind of like the gloomy one. So it just kind of telling it's sort of like about his inner state of emotional emptiness. It's kind of
Well,
cool.
that's isn't that like one of his last lines in the last lines of dialogue in the film? He screams out, "Hoffman."
Mm.
My name is so weird, Rex Hoffman.
Yeah, he makes fun of his name. Like as a French person, he makes fun of like the Dutch names because he explains a few of like what the surnames mean. He's just like that's just weird. He's like Rex. He's like my neighbor's dog is named Rex.
I think he talked with Sluzier. Sluzier, the
Yeah.
director.
Okay.
I think that
Yeah.
may be who he talked to about the names
Okay.
because they didn't actually get along very well, him and the writer, because he
Okay.
said
I didn't know that.
he wrote a screen. He said write me a screenplay,
Oh yeah, I
and
knew
then
that he wasn't happy with the original, and that's why he collaborated with him. He didn't think the first attempt at a screenplay was very good.
they collaborated I think a couple times, and he still didn't like it, so he basically just fired. He bought the rights to it, and then fired him off and wrote it himself. So
Oh wow.
it's screenplay based on the novel by or novella.
Hmm.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I guess sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Was a good movie, so yeah, I suppose he knew what he was doing to a certain
Hmm.
extent. I mean, it's one of the things when you're doing sort of a creative collaboration is it's hard to please everyone. And sometimes
Hmm.
you just, if you have a sort of a singular vision with that, sometimes you just sort of have to press ahead yourself, even if you might ruffle other people's feathers along the way.
Yeah.
It's not something I'd be very good at, I don't think. Although at the same time, I'm not very good at collaborating that way either. I mean, I guess I would if I had to, because I mean, I'm used to creatively doing stuff on myself for the most part. I mean, I had a period in university where I had some friends and stuff that I bounced off stuff, but that wasn't serious stuff. That wasn't like a really serious thing. So it's not like it was ever a big deal if we had criticism of each other, because it's not
Right.
like it was. We weren't making a movie or anything like that. It was mostly us just screwing around and stuff. So, but anyway, what I meant is I can certainly appreciate like the mindset of like you personally working on something or having a vision of it, and uh, not being like annoyed or anything by other people's efforts, but it's just not necessary because you know what you want, what your vision is, what it's supposed to be. You don't need input from other people. It's just gonna sort of get in the way. So yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
I
I
can
guess, I
totally.
guess I was in that situation. I guess if I was in that situation, I would probably be able to uh, pro. I guess I'd be able to prevail.
I think
But
they did reconcile their friendship later on, but I think he was pretty pissed off for quite a while. But I mean, you just imagine it's your work. This is my stuff that you're adapting. And he was giving him a say in it up until a certain point, and then all of a sudden,
mhm.
sorry, it's
Yeah,
not working. I bought the
yeah.
rights, so now I'm
It
gonna write it myself.
it's a bit of a tricky situation.
Yeah, sure. Like you said, you can't please everyone.
Yeah. There are still some things in the movie that I wonder about the translation, because at one point when Raymond is talking about his first sort of a weird epiphany when he was 16 and he jumped off the balcony, he says that he broke his arm and it cost him 2 fingers. But clearly the actor has 10 fingers. So I don't know what he meant by that, or if he was just screwing with him, or if there's something messed up in the translation. But he clearly or he very clearly in French says that it cost him 2 fingers. But
maybe nerve damage, or maybe he wasn't able to use them completely or something. Or
I guess that's possible.
they didn't
But I
heal
was
correctly.
because I remember like looking really hard, and I was like, he has all his fingers. What are you talking about? But you're right. It could just be something like that. So
Yeah.
I probably was just fixating on something rather insignificant.
I don't think I realized that.
Yeah. But just another way to interpret it again is like even he's just messing with him a little bit more because he can. He's got this guy. He has it is sort of a rare thing, and you understand why for a sociopath or even a normal person it's kind of attractive to be in that position, because to have somebody's utter attention, it's actually more of a rare thing than you think. Like, he has his full and complete attention because he's talking about the most important thing in the world to him, and he's the only one that knows it. So he can sort of get away with doing or saying whatever he wants. He can screw around. The guy's not going to like throw up his hands and leave. He can't. He's involved. So I can sort of see from the outside the appeal of having someone's full attention in that way. Like, you're the most important thing in the world to them. And even if you jerk them around a bit, they just have to put up with it because you have what they need. In this case, it would be the answer. You have the answer. What happened to Saskia? I'm willing to go through whatever it is.
But yeah, I think I was trying to figure out who had mentioned it, but someone mentioned in the chat that this was on Bravo's like 100 scariest films or whatever, and I think that
Okay.
that may
Probably,
be
yeah.
where I first heard about it. And I don't think I saw it until maybe 2006, something like that.
That's around the time I saw it. It was 2006, 2007, and I specifically rented it. And I think it was a similar thing. I don't know. I don't think it was Bravo, but I think maybe online somewhere it was included on like somebody's list of like suspense movies or something like that. And it got me interested. And as I read about it, I found out that it had a pretty strong reputation. That a lot of people thought really highly of it as a thriller. And in short order, I sought it out and rented it.
Yeah. Let's see.
And I was definitely satisfied with it. It's too bad. There probably were extras on it, but I don't think I watched them.
It's on the 1001 movies to watch before you die also.
Okay, yeah.
Quite a few of the films we do on here are on that list as well. Yes, it was on another list too. Someone else said it was like one of the 20, number 20 scariest movies, or maybe I saw that somewhere else.
Yeah.
It was like I don't know, some magazine.
I'm fairly certain it's the only Dutch movie I've seen to date.
Really?
It's Dutch/French, but yeah. I mean, I've seen a few Danish movies, including the one we talked about, Night Watch. I've seen a few Danish films, but I think this is the only Dutch one so far. Being the Netherlands. Isn't that funny? You're Dutch, you're from the Netherlands, or possibly Holland. Holland is a part of the Netherlands, and sometimes people say Holland to represent the whole thing, even though that's not correct. It's often accepted anyway. So it's really kind of a confusing thing.
It is. It is confusing.
I'm from the Netherlands, so you're from Holland. No, I'm not from that part. But I thought that was the country. No, the country is the Netherlands. So you're Dutch.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like any of it goes together.
Yeah.
The other main thing I know about the Netherlands is the band Live. It's basically revered there.
Is that where they're still have a big fan base?
Yeah, that's where their live album is, and like the crowd is just chanting like almost every word back to them.
Oh,
and
wow.
even before the live album came out, they had back around 2001ish when they had that really weird album V. That doesn't sound like a cohesive album to me. It just sounds like a bunch of like B-sides that couldn't fit in anywhere. Anyway, if you got like the special edition of that, it came with a little DVD that had a short appearance of them at some festival in Holland somewhere, and like yeah, you can see the crowd's appreciation for them there too. So yeah, it's funny how just certain bands have like a following in a certain country, and especially when like they're like either they're no longer a big draw in their own country, or maybe they never even were. Like they were never at any point big in their own country but for whatever reason, some other country it really resonated.
It's like David Hasselhoff was big in Germany, for God's sakes.
Yeah, stuff like that. I always think of like big in Japan as almost kind of like a saying. That singer-songwriter guy, Craig Cardiff, who I kind of know, he has a song called That Band. And that's one of like the lines. It's like that band says they're big in Europe. That band says they're big in Japan. The whole point is like, we've never heard of you. Yeah, well, we're big over there.
Yeah.
That thing, which I think is kind of a saying for sure.
We're huge in Iceland, man.
Because yeah, because every once in a while I'll look up like an older band on Wikipedia and I'm like, they must have broken up ages ago. It's like they're still tour. Oh, they still tour because they're big in Australia and nowhere else. But
see, I've got some Turkish movie. I mean, some not Turkish, Dutch movies here.
Okay.
The horror film from 1988, Amsterdam.
No,
it's Dutch. That's a really good one. I saw that one like quite a bit back in the day for some reason. I don't know why that was playing somewhere.
Well, right from the title, you know that's Dutch.
Sure. I was just looking at a list here on Google. Saint or Scent is the original title. Another horror film. And Borgman, another thriller horror, which is really good. I recommend.
Okay.
If people haven't seen it.
No, I've seen none of those. I'm fairly certain this so far is the only Dutch film I've seen, which is why I thought I'd mention it. But yeah, I'll try to look into some others because why not?
Yeah, whenever we get to the end of the show, I want to mention a film I saw this weekend.
Okay, cool. I think what else there is going to say about this movie? Because in some ways it's very effective, but it's effective in sort of a very simple delivery. It's not bogged down by subplots or anything or extraneous characters. It keeps the focus right on Rex and Raymond, where pretty much belongs, and it's nice. Some juxtaposition of Raymond's flashbacks, sort of showing, kind of giving us a little bit of insight into his character. Although in a sort of different way, really, which shows that he's kind of an emotional blank slate because he's the sociopath that he is. But it also, I think it shows, again, we talk, as I said, luckily, most sociopaths who exist in the world don't commit really violent crimes and murder people. They probably do all sorts of shitty things, but for whatever reason, maybe just because it's safer not to, they don't do that. In this, we kind of get a concrete reason why he decides. Because, he's not like a pathological, like some of them who are, they crave violence, they need it, right, and that's why they do it. He's not like that. But he has sort of, again, that sort of epiphany where he from saving the girl, where he's like, wow, I finally, like, I always feel nothing. I've got this family, I've got this job, all this stuff worked out for me, and I don't feel anything. But saving the girl, for most people, saving the girl, if it was an epiphany for us, would be like, it's really great helping people. I need to help people more. But his mind doesn't work like that. His was, if it feels so great to help save somebody, will it feel just as good to kill somebody? And that's what he decides to embark on. Because to him, they're pretty much the same thing. Even though anybody else would see them as complete opposites. To him, he's just like, well, they're opposites, but they might have the same effect on me. And all that matters is me and my feeling. And the early thing about the jumping off, that was the whole idea. And that's something I can almost relate to, because I think we've all had this, where if you're standing on something high, and you almost feel like I could just, jump. I could jump. Of course, I'm not going to jump. And then sometimes I've even played with that. And was just like, but I could.
Hmm.
I could. It's just a physical action that my body can do. Like, and but again, just sort of prove that he's other and different from the average person. He actually does go through with it. Not for any reason, not because he wants to hurt himself, but as he says, like, is it predestined that I don't jump? Like, I don't want fate to control me. So here I am going against fate. And that was what made him happy. It's like, fate was that I wouldn't do it, but I defied fate. And then it gets used again at the end when Rex is agonizing over his final proposal, which is, if you want to follow this all the way, then drink this. And he's like, it's what's in it? It's drugged. It's a sleeping pill. I drugged her. I'll drug you, and I promise when you wake up, you'll know. And rationally, Rex is still, even though he's the emotional wreck and everything, and he's upset, he still has that bit of rationality that said where he's about to walk away. He's like, I'm not going to do that. I know enough. Like, fuck you. Like, I'm obviously upset because I can't get revenge on you, even though he's trying to say he's past all that anyway. Like, I don't hate, because he says, I don't want revenge. I don't hate you. I just need to know. So he kind of puts him to the ultimate test of that. So now, but again, he's acting at first like what most of us would want to act, being rational, saying, no, screw it. I know enough. I'm walking away. But then, and of course, it's kind of a neat moment too, because now a thunder and lightning storm is starting up, which is, a bit on the nose, but still, it sort of shows, the emotional torment that's raging inside him is also raging outside. And we get to see him sort of agonizing. And then he just all of a sudden takes it and drinks it and throws it against the windshield because at that point, Raymond's back in the car watching him through the windshield. And then his explanation to him is, the same thing what he said about when he jumped. He said, I saw myself, what was it? I saw that it was my fate or whatever to not drink it. So I just went against fate. Something like that. It's like I saw myself drinking it in defiance of fate or something like that. It's kind of cool. It's a neat little sort of echo of what Raymond had told him earlier. And as I said, I can sort of relate to it. I think that's how sometimes people can sort of do extraordinary things or things that seem contrary to human nature, like some sort of self-harm or suicide or whatever. It's almost like some extra gear that a person might be able to find to defy fate. There's some interesting stuff in the movie about fate, because he's talking about defying fate, but he also talks about how fate is important and can control things, because he just says, when he mentions the thing about the sneeze, he's just, it was fate. I was this close to taking another woman, and then I sneezed, and that changed everything, and that's how I wound up with Saskia, and that's why you're where you are now. And it is an interesting thing to think about, because stuff like that does happen in real life, where some small instance, something that seems insignificant changes something and makes all the difference in the world. So, yeah, that's another thing that I think most people can relate to and think about is fate. It's like, does that mean it was meant to happen? When sometimes a sequence or chain of events plays out in a certain way, you think, wow, what are the odds of that? I guess it was meant to be, I mean, I think even the most pragmatic of us, not pragmatic, a better word, cynical maybe, can sometimes really be struck and think maybe fate is a thing, because sometimes things just seem to fall in such a way and we're just like, wow, like how else could this happen? Like this was meant to happen type thing. So yeah, there's some interesting back and forth there about fate. So at one point he talks about like how fate definitely is a thing, but he also talks about how like maybe at least a certain kind of person, like an exceptional person like himself, can go against fate, can defy it. I think is kind of what his feeling on it is, and that's what Rex ascends to, I guess, to make his final decision, which leads to his demise, but it also does lead to him getting his answer, which was ultimately at that point all he wanted. He wanted his answer.
Yeah, it's quite a journey to. Yeah, I don't know. It's, I think Jacob McCullum said in the chat he would have just killed Raymond and been done with it. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. But
Yeah. But, I mean, again, I understand the point of view. For one thing, he probably would get caught if he murdered Raymond. And some people say, well, I don't mind. I'll go to jail for it. But then again, you'd be going to jail saying you killed the person that got Saskia, but nobody would believe you. Like, you're crazy. You thought he killed Saskia, but there's no proof of that. You just killed some guy, I don't know. It's interesting because a lot of what Rex does seems to go against human nature, but I think a lot of it actually follows human nature very closely, really. As I said, so many times people in our lives, including me, have like sought out the truth when we've known it's not a good idea and it will probably hurt us in some way because it's just so important to know. I don't
He
know.
was,
At one point, he does physically attack Raymond, but he just realizes that he's
mhm.
not getting what he needs from it. Like he's not happy with it. He could have followed up. He could have kept going, perhaps, presumably beaten him to death, but it's not in him to do that.
Yeah. Raymond knows this guy really well.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Yes.
studied him, and he's banking on him not killing him, not going to the police, not
Yeah.
because
He realizes he is taking a certain amount of risk
yeah,
here, but he's called his bluff or whatever. Like as you said, he's banking on it, and he's right, and it all works out for him. It's definitely a bad guy wins situation because, as I said, it seems heavily implied that he's definitely going to resume this and maybe do this with some more people in the future since it's worked out so well for him and since he gets such enjoyment out of it. And that's the thing. He's lived a life where the things that most people get fulfillment and enjoyment out of mean nothing to him. So he has to go to these extremes to get it, which really is, again, true to life. That's kind of how it is with a lot of serial killers. I mean, a lot of them are maybe more base and savage, but that doesn't mean there aren't more intellectual ones like him around. Because everybody's different. I mean, the most common sort of serial killer you usually hear about is the one that, it's really tied up in sex. They get a real sexual charge out of, usually if it's a man with a woman, dominating the woman and being able to end her, kill her, the power, the sex power transfer thing. But every once in a while, it is something different. And this killer is that kind of killer. Like, right? Yeah, it's definitely power, but it's not tied up into the more primal or sexual things.
I can't think of any of the major well-known serial killers that weren't in one way or another.
Yeah, the major ones, it's pretty much driven by sex, and almost all of them usually did some sort of rape or sexual assault prior to the killing.
Bundy did, right? Bundy raped him.
Bundy, absolutely. Bundy was a crazed rapist. It was all about raping them and then killing them at the end of it. So Bundy, 100%. I've talked about Dahmer a few times in that he is a little bit different. In that for him, it was certainly sexual and everything like that, but the killing wasn't something he even really wanted to do. He just thought he needed to do it. He says, like a quote from him. This is me paraphrasing. He just says, the killing was like the least satisfying part. Like it was a means to an end. Like he really didn't want to kill anybody. He just felt like it had to be done. So
I think ideally he would just want a sex slave.
Yeah, and that's what he kept trying to do. Like he just wanted somebody that would be totally submissive to him and just be available as a sex object, which is still obviously very horrendous and awful and stuff. But unlike a lot of these killers, their absolute moment of thrilling, and sometimes they'd even fucking ejaculate to it, is when they are actually doing the killing.
Right.
But for somebody, like Dahmer, no, the killing was almost regrettable. Like, I don't know exactly if he had remorse, if he was really capable, because he was definitely really fucked up. But I always put him to the side of a lot of these killers, and that he definitely wasn't sadistic. He wasn't somebody that he didn't take pleasure in inflicting pain or causing fear. He really didn't. He was still fucked up and did a lot of awful things and stuff, but it was for different reasons.
He really, I think, wanted the totem aspect. That was his big thing, was taking, the body parts, the skulls, and
But there was an emotional,
yeah.
but there was an emotional and sentimental component to it, as ghoulish as it sounds. Because usually, when you think about the killers that take the trophy, it's just, well, here's me remembering my great moment, how I murdered this human being. For him, it was actually much more gentle and sentimental, as fucked up as that sounds, because he did genuinely like the person when they were alive, and he likes being reminded of them.
Right, and I think maybe that's where the sexual aspect would come into it.
But still, it was a sexual thing. Like he wanted somebody to have sex with, and just at any moment and stuff. And even when they were corpses, he was happy to have sex with them until they, decomposed to a certain extent where he couldn't do it anymore. Pretty messed up shit. But yeah, still have been a few serial killers, but not the big famous ones. But there are more like Raymond, where it's just more about maybe proving that you're smarter than somebody or superior. Of course, those killings that I always forget their names, but there's like a somewhat fictionalized version in the Hitchcock movie Rope. Remember
Yeah.
those two guys? They were like young college kids, but they were really smart, and their whole point was to commit a murder and get away with it, just to prove that they could.
That's the
That they could.
Sandra Bullock movie, right? Um,
Oh, Murder by Numbers.
yeah,
I'm sure Murder by Numbers was at least loosely inspired by it, but
oh, okay.
there's a real case back in like the 20s or whatever, where two young men um, kidnapped and strangled a younger guy, and the whole point was just because they really bought into the idea of some of the philosophy out there that there were people that were like above morals. Like it was all well and good to have morals and law for the average person, but they weren't average. Like it would be like they'd say, yeah, it's immoral for you to kill you. That's immoral and bad. But I'm up here. If I kill
Mhm.
you, it's not bad. They were trying to prove that. What is it? Leopold and somebody, I can't remember the names. I think one of the names is Leopold. They're that's how Clarence Darrow, the lawyer, first got famous, in that he's the one who defended them. Clarence Darrow, of course, would later do the famous Scopes monkey trial, the whole thing about the evolution in the schools and stuff. But yeah, just because it's bugging me now, I'll just flip over.
Leopold and Loeb.
That sounds yeah, that's right. Loeb, Leopold and Loeb. But yeah, so they were kind of more this kind of killer, in that they weren't like there was no sexual component to it. It wasn't about dominating or anything like that. It was more about proving, one, because they thought they weren't going to get caught, that they could not only could they commit a murder and get away with it, but also the idea was, again, like, well, it's okay for us to commit murder because we're superior beings. They were really smart. They were like genius level guys. Like one of them like knew multiple languages, and one of them, at least I think both of them, when they were in prison, spent their time actually teaching and educating other inmates and stuff. So that, I mean, they were. So yeah, I think they're kind of the closest real counterpoint or real life counter to this guy counterpart to Raymond. That kind of killer, not like a sexual killer or a sadistic killer, but a killer that is just emotionally and detached and feels maybe the need to prove something or to feel a certain amount of power and stuff. Because I mean, they only killed one person because they did get caught, but they probably would have killed more people if they gotten away with it. But yeah, they do a pretty good. It's fictional, but it's based on them. The movie Rope is pretty cool because not only do they kill the guy, then they stuff him in a box and throw a dinner party in the apartment with him in there. Just and of course Jimmy Stewart's character, their old university professor, figures it out and catches them. Really great movie. I talk about it a lot because it's one of my favorites. But yeah, those two. That's what I think of when I think of a killer like Raymond. I think they were kind of the same way.
Just to do it, really. It's kind of like
Yeah,
just to prove that they could do it.
yeah.
It's like
But they also thought it was their right too, because they really did fervently believe in this whole thing about them being like elevated people, like Uber or whatever, like above other people. Because they say, well, we believe in morals and we believe in right and wrong, but it does not apply to us if you put us like with other people because we're above them. That was really the point they were trying to make in their argument, which really just sort of proves that no, you're sociopaths or psychopaths or whatever like that. But so they weren't as aware. In a way, Raymond was more aware because Raymond was perfectly aware of what he was, and he was certainly at peace with it. In fact, there's a few times where when he's telling everything to Rex, Rex just says, "You're insane. You're completely insane." And at one point, Raymond just shrugs his shoulders and says, "It doesn't matter." And he's right. It doesn't. You can tell me I'm insane. Maybe I am, but it in no way matters in this situation. The point is, I did this, and you want to know the rest. You have to play my game.
Mm-hmm. I watched a documentary about Dahmer this weekend, and That's not what I was talking about earlier, but it's almost like, if he lived somewhere else, he would have gotten caught a lot sooner. Or if he, didn't prey upon,
Mostly like young black men or young
young
men of
black
color.
gay men that were pretty much estranged from their families anyway.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. It's like he kind of lived in a not so good area that, you know,
Yeah.
they were more concerned with catching like drug dealers and stuff than this guy
Well,
stockpiling, body
I mean, at
parts.
one point, I mean, it was crazy, right? Like one of them escaped naked, running down the street, rambling. Some people found him. They called a cop over. The cop came,
They
and
brought
he
him back
started
to
rambling.
Jeff. They
Yeah,
brought him back
Jeff
there to Jeff.
Dahmer found them and quietly talked them down. Said, "Oh, he's my lover. He was underage, but he said no, he's 19. He's just had too much to drink. Don't listen to him. Let me take him home." They did, and then he later killed him. Like, so yeah, pretty crazy. Like, can you imagine being the family of those people? Like, the cops had him right there. Everything was right in front of them, and they believed, Dahmer, the unassuming, clean-cut white guy. They're like,
Yeah.
of course, okay, of course, yeah, you're on the level, sure. Like, and especially then the other thing had to do with their discomfort with gay stuff. Like the cops, they didn't want to deal with it. They're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want
Oh,
to get in
okay,
the middle
buddy.
of
All right.
okay,
All
I don't want to get in the middle of your affairs here. Okay, take your
right.
boyfriend and get out of here. Like, really, that was the attitude of most of these cops, right? Like, they're
Having a
just
lover spat.
exactly, they're just sort of annoyed and just sort of disgusted by it. They're just like, I don't want to get into this. Like, they're cops, so they know they can't make a big deal. They're just like, don't involve us.
But hearing some of the other people that lived in that apartment building,
Oh
like
man, I
the
can't
clues
imagine
were everywhere, man. It's like
the
everybody.
smells.
Yeah.
I feel bad for the people who live in that apartment building, man.
It's like, dude had a 55-gallon drum of, what is it, boric acid or some sort of
Yeah.
acid.
I mean, he often had people over in that apartment where he had like body parts all over the place,
Yeah.
and including his parents. There was a part where his parents came to visit him. There's footage of it. Like one of his parents had the videotape, and they were just
Yeah.
talking to him. And at one point, they say, "You look good," or "You're eating well." It's like, oh god, because Dahmer, of course, was one of the guys that actually ate some pieces of his victims. So, oh man,
Oh, well, he says I've been basically
mostly
living off of
McDonald's.
McDonald's. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, oh, mostly McDonald's.
That should be their new ad campaign. Like, I'm loving it.
The choice of serial killers and the president, apparently. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, Bill Clinton liked his Big Mac.
Yeah, that multiple presidents, exactly. I mean, right there.
Bill Clinton would jog to the McDonald's with a team of Secret Service behind him.
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny.
Yeah, I know SNL did a few skits on it back in the day.
Yeah, that's pretty funny, really. Slick Willie.
Jacob McCullum says, "Oh, don't be mistaken. When I say I'd kill Raymond, I'm not criticizing the movie. I get that Rex doesn't have it in him. I just know that I would end up killing him." Sure,
Yeah, I get it too.
understandable. I don't know how I would react in that situation.
I mean, to have somebody like not only admit to that they did this, but just sort of calmly talking to you about it, you can like, because I mean, I'd like to think that I'm not the type of person that would just fly off the handle for revenge, although it's a thing. But I mean, in that situation, I think yeah, it would be easy, of course, to lose control. He's calmly just talking about it, like, oh yeah, I did it. What are you going to do? Because he knows he has him.
I say, I would probably kill him too, but who knows? I'd be so, been out of shape emotionally. What I would do. People always say, "Oh, I would do this or I would do that in that situation," but you never know until
you never really know.
How you would react. People, oh fuck it, man! I would just pick the sword up and chop his head off, or something.
Although the main thing that does annoy me is in those movies where like there is like a bad guy killer and the person they're coming after gets sort of like, anyway, there's a struggle for a gun or something, and the good guy has the gun, and the killer just calmly walks up and is like, "You won't shoot me. You don't have it in you." And then they just calmly take the gun from them. All
Yeah.
I can think is, yeah, like I don't have it in me either, but that doesn't mean I can't shoot you in the kneecap or something. I would at least have it in me to incapacitate them. I'd be like, "You're right. I'm not a murderer like you. I won't blow your head off, but to stop you from killing me, I will, shoot you non-lethally."
Yeah.
And I
don't have to
know
go on
I
trial
haven't
for
practiced.
murder.
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't practiced with guns. I'm not like a amazing shot, but I'm pretty sure if somebody's walking towards me, I could manage to hit them in the leg.
Yeah.
I don't think that would take a marksman.
Yeah. I wouldn't
So
think
yeah, that always annoys me in movies because I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not a violent person. I don't like guns or anything, but I'm pretty sure if I was in your situation, I would still have you know, the wherewithal to be able to like at least get off a shot non-lethally, maybe hit them in the leg.
Oh yeah, Jacob McCallum brings up another good point. The Iceman, Richard Kalinsky,
Oh yeah,
he was
the
another
guy.
one that was not sexual.
Yeah, he was interesting because he was a serial killer that actually realized he could get paid for it and did like mafia killings, right? Like he
Yeah.
wasn't affiliated with the mob, but he somehow got a hold of them. It's like, I like killing people, so I'm pretty good at it. So how about you pay me for it? Yeah, so yeah, he was an interesting one too. And then I don't think he really cared that much about the money, but he realized that it was something practical he could do, right? Like, might as well get paid. And very useful to like an organization like the mafia to have a killer like that, because I don't know, just because all these hard, the mafia is full of hard, tough guys, but that doesn't mean everybody you send out is perfectly reliable to kill somebody just because they're in this organization. They could have issues with it. They might at the last moment not be able to pull the trigger or go through with it, but you don't have to worry about it with a guy like him. He got it done
Mm-hmm.
because he was outside of it all anyway. It was business. You have the mafia killers like, well, it was business, but it was business, but it was their business. So there still is an attachment to it. It's their business. So it is still somewhat personal. It's like, Mickey, don't take it personal. It's just business. Yeah, but you are taking it personally. That's why you're killing him, because he's messing with your business. So. And of course, the female serial killers, pretty much none of them have the sexual component.
Yeah, that's
Female
true.
serial killers being rare enough as it is, right? And usually they kill in less violent ways, a lot of serial poisoners and stuff like that. It's funny though, like you have male serial killers usually mostly kill females. Although if they're gay, it's usually you kill who you have sex with, who you're attracted to. There's like no like who are there any female killers that mostly killed women? I don't think so.
No, but I mean, what is her name? Eileen Warnos. She was lesbian, right?
Yeah, that's what she said. I don't really believe it. I just think she was, bi, and she got to a point where she became sick of men and was more interested and found relationships with women more fulfilling. But I don't really believe. Not that it really matters, but that's just personally what I think. But I mean, she certainly had reason to be turned off men right from the beginning. She was getting molested from an early age by various men. So you could understand how that would really just turn her in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not as I've said, I'm not one of those people that believes that things turn you gay. I think you're born a certain way, but I do think things can at least sway you to a certain extent, like something extreme like her. Like, I think she was probably capable of being attracted to both sexes, but after all men had done with her, it was much more fulfilling and safe to go with women. But sure, if people, but maybe she was a lesbian. I don't know. It's not that important in the grand scheme of things, but
I mean, I think pretty much all serial killers have got a history of very violent childhoods and sexual abuse usually going along with that.
the vast majority of them, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Dahmer, no. Nobody did anything to Dahmer, did they? I know he kind of had a strained relationship with his parents when he was a kid, because he went to like live with a grandmother or something like that. But like there was no abuse or anything like that.
Not that I can think of right off, but
Yeah, but a lot of them,
Usually it's
had really messed up childhood. You know, it's like their mom was like a 15-year-old prostitute and stuff like that.
usually like it's a really dominant, overly abusive mother. I think is one of the big
Oh yeah, yeah, and they
things.
play that. And they play that up in fiction too. Like that's big in Red Dragon, right? And that one actually was a grandmother, not a mother. But, same deal. Domineering female parent type figure.
It's like Bundy is essentially killing his mom every time he kills someone.
Yeah.
They all kind of look similar. I think blue eyes, brown hair, something like that, or green eyes, brown hair.
Yeah, something like that.
Gary Ridgway was the same way.
Which one's he?
The Green River Killer.
Okay, yeah.
He freaks me out like more than most. Not only at the body count that we know of that he's confessed to, but just the fact that he would go back and have sex with the corpses. That's
yeah.
I mean,
yeah, he wasn't keeping them. He wasn't even keeping them in his apartment like that. He would like go to like some isolated place where he'd kill them. But yeah, he was. Woo.
I mean, for like 6 months. I mean, can you imagine what that shape of that body was in, and you're still able to do that? Oh man,
I don't like to imagine it.
That's. I mean, the smell of rotting flesh is so putrid.
I know, to even just be around it.
I mean, you can't get it off of you. Like, ugh. I had a freezer that burned out a few years ago, and
he's another guy that took him forever to catch too.
Oh yeah, he killed.
I mean, he was murdering people like in the 70s, I think, or at least the very early 80s, and he didn't get arrested till I think 2001 something. Jesus.
And like BTK was the same type way. They were both like really similar in that they had families and successful guys in their communities.
Yeah, but BTK was actually pretty smart, whereas Ridgway was more lucky, I think.
Sending an email from your church computer is not smart.
No.
That's how they caught him after so many years.
Well, I mean, I guess he was smart up to a point. Like he was smart for a long time. Like he mostly did. But but there's quite a few killers out there that have like it's just amazing. Like because they're not at all like what we think of when we think of the TV serial killer, the smart, cunning one. Like there's ones out there like they have like barely, they're barely functional IQs and they don't have any plans. They just go up murder people, and you're just amazed. You look up and like, how did they manage to like elude cops for so long and stuff? It's like
the DNA, man. You can't get around that shit. Not anymore.
Yeah. The era has a lot to do with it too. As we talked about a lot, like something like being in the 60s and 70s, just how easy it was to get away with so many crimes.
Oh, they were talking about in California alone, just like the number of bodies they found along the highway. It's insane.
Mm-hmm.
And they tracked some of these down, to a few different killers, but they never caught all those guys who were doing that.
Right. Well, I mean, a country like the U.S. is so easy to disappear in. That's why, like, there's like an estimated between 2,000 and 3,000 active serial killers in the country right now.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, between 2,000 and 3,000, just based on various reports of bodies and stuff like that. I can believe it because it's a big country. There's a lot of people, but it's also a big country, so you can move around a lot. If you're just interested in killing like people completely at random.
That's how you do it. You don't stay in one place.
Yeah, you move around. Kill somebody in this area, drive around.
All right, we're going to give you instructions now on how to get away with this.
Yeah, I know.
But I mean, it makes sense, right?
Serial killers out there will tell you how to do it.
I mean, if Orc says one of those is me.
But just keep playing games, Orc.
I mean, if I was gonna do something like that, I probably could get away with it for a little while. I mean, because I watch enough of this stuff to know what not to do.
Yeah. Well, the number one thing, of course, is just make sure it's nobody that's like in any way connected to your actual life. Like, that's the number one thing. Mm-hmm. Besides that, I think distance is the other key. Sort of kill somebody somewhere. If you're going to kill somebody else again, make it far away, not in anywhere not anywhere close. And then like the way you kill them, of course. Mm-hmm. Shoot this person, stab this person, strangle that person. And don't give the police a pattern to follow. Which so many serial killers just can't seem to help. Like they probably know that, but in the moment of killing, like, it probably just take, like, this is how I like to do it type thing. So, and then there's the rare type of serial killer that wants to leave a pattern.
Yeah.
It's important to leave their signature. And part of me thinks maybe that is the type of serial killer I'd be. I might as well be theatrical about it. I might as well, like, write weird messages on the wall in blood and try to fuck with the cops and act like I'm, some really smart guy.
Write it with your left hand or your whatever your non-dominant hand is.
Yeah, exactly. All that stuff. But, the cops have been pretty good at seeing through some of that stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
When they, sometimes they'll, like, write in some letter full of shit grammar and stuff like that. And the cops figure out pretty fast that they're just putting it on. That this is actually an intelligent guy pretending to be stupid. Like, because I guess they have, like, handwriting analysts and stuff like that. And, they figure out the syntax and stuff. It's like, this isn't like somebody stupid. This is somebody pretending to be stupid.
It's hard to get away with that stuff now. I mean, not only just DNA, but just
it's just so hard to sending stuff is almost impossible.
Really good forensics, like
it's like you're gonna send stuff like that gets traced.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you think you're being smart about it, like, oh, okay, I'll mail from this PO box, or I'll drop it off here. Like, it's amazing how that stuff can get traced.
Well, like metered mail, like they can track that down to the actual machine that did it, and. I know nobody uses typewriters anymore, but that was one way they were able to find people.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm interested in all this stuff, and obviously I really like a lot of serial killer movies. This is a very different one because this movie's not about being visceral. It's not about being visceral or scary. It just sort of shows the banality of it, sort of the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see any violence or killing. We don't get any montages, as we said, of the killer being all spooky and stuff. We just get him very dispassionately sort of just talking about it. And it's chilling in that way, and I think that's why it resonates with so many people, because the other stuff is scary, and some of it is true to life, but this is kind of more true to life, and also a little bit more scary because it's so hard to detect, because it's like you might know a person just like this and have no idea because they're so good at hiding it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I said, I really like that shot of him after the birthday where it zooms in on him smiling, because you understand there's nothing behind the smile. Like, he's got it. He has a great life. His family loves him, but it does nothing for him. That's
what the show Dexter focused a lot on, because that's what he was.
Yeah,
and he was always like trying to feel something,
Mm-hmm. Like, the idea being that the guy who raised him figured out what he was, and it's like, I know you don't feel stuff, but I'm gonna just try to convince you to be on the side of good just for the hell of it. I know you don't care about being good, but I don't know, sometimes the show struggled with that because they still wanted to be heroes. Sometimes they made it clear that he really did care about being good, even though he'll later say, like, I felt nothing, or I don't care. It's just like, no, they pretty much showed that you do care. Like, I think they had a lot of trouble walking that line.
They did. As did the writer of the books. I think most of those books are not that great from what I've heard from people.
Darkly Dreaming Dexter, I think, is the first one.
Yeah.
There was a time when, like, that show first came on where I was definitely going to read all the books. So I was really excited by the show and stuff, but then I just lost enthusiasm for it.
I never got around to it.
I still would like to watch some of the later seasons. I kind of left it the most interesting part of the whole thing. I was right in the whole middle of the John Lithgow thing, and I just stopped watching. And that was really interesting, compelling stuff.
That's great. Yeah, I would definitely say watch that.
That had won me back over because I hated the season before, the whole thing with Jimmy Smits. I hated that. And this was totally making up for it. I was like, oh, this is great. And I just sort of dropped out of it. So I'll have to revisit it. But, I hate to be cliche, but, like, my favorite serial killer movie is probably Seven, as much as it's a cliche. And, I really like Red Dragon and Manhunter. I like them both. They're both good in different ways. I like the different approaches. I probably like Red Dragon a bit more. It's a bit more slick and polished. Plus, it has Ed Norton and Anthony Hopkins, who I much prefer to the other actors in the other movie. But the other movie has some things going for it that I really like too.
Maybe we should cover Manhunter on here, because that's one I've just never been able to get into, man. And I need to sit down and force myself to watch it, because Michael Mann has something with pacing that just does not sit well with me.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because it's subtle. It's more subtle change than other things. But here's the main thing that bothers me in watching that, and it's very hard to watch it with if you've seen Red Dragon first, like I did. I saw Red Dragon before I ever saw Manhunter. Even though Manhunter's much older, but I still didn't see it till probably the mid 2000s, and I did like it. But I was gotten so used to, and I love the book, by the way. That's a book I reread like all the time. It's right over here. Where is it? There it is. Here's Red Dragon. I haven't read it in about 2 years, but I'll read it again probably pretty soon. I just read it all the freaking time. This is a book I read. So I know the lines very well. So I know what's in the book and in the movie. And they do a good job of putting a lot of the dialogue and stuff in the movies. And there's parts where in both movies where they have the same dialogue, the exact same dialogue taken straight out of the book. And I can't stand the delivery of it in Manhunter. I always feel like in Manhunter, they're rushing everything. Like, it's funny. So I remember this stuff really well. So I think of Ralph Fiennes as the Tooth Fairy, or what do I call him, Francis Dollarhide. And there's that part where he's got the reporter. And he's talking to Philip Seymour Hoffman and stuff. He's showing him the slides, and he's just like, "Do you see?" and all that. Remember all that stuff,
Yeah.
So there's a part where he's like, "You think you understand?" And he's like, "But you understand nothing." He's saying all this. Ralph Fiennes is making good use of the dramatic pause. Obviously, any technique can be overused and misused. Sometimes they'll do a dramatic pause and it's cheesy or stupid or it doesn't work. Ralph Fiennes is doing a great job, and so is everybody else. Go back and watch Manhunter and Brian Noonan or whatever. Not sorry, Brian Noonan's a hockey player.
Tom Noonan.
Tom Noonan just blows through those lines. He's like, "You think you understand, but you understand nothing. You're an ant in the afterbirth." Like, he just rapid fire is just saying all this stuff way too fast. He's not letting any of it sink in. And he's not the only one. The guy that plays Lecter does the same thing. Whereas Anthony Hopkins has his very controlled Lecter. He enunciates. This guy, he's just so conversational, and he doesn't, there's no gravity, or gravita, perhaps, if you want to fancy it up. There's no gravita, or he just takes Lecter, who is actually a very theatrical villain, and he just makes him very ordinary. So there's a few times in that where specifically, especially the two killers, Lecter and Dollarhide, where they just seem to blow through their lines compared to Red Dragon. So that's something that has always stuck with me and bothered me. So I don't know if exactly that's pacing, but I could just see, I guess Michael Mann thought that was good enough. And I realized that I can only judge them by seeing the other one first. But I would still like to think, pretend the Red Dragon doesn't exist yet. It's 1986 or whatever, and the movies come out, and I just know the book. I think I still would want to say you're rushing your lines. Especially, I would say it to the guy playing Lecter. Because I'd be like, Lecter, he enjoys this kind of thing. He wants to be theatrical. He loves the attention and stuff. So don't just, rush through his lines. Like, you're very pale. There's, your hands are very rough, Will, again, in the case of Lecter, it's almost impossible because Anthony Hopkins is so iconic. I don't know. The other guy just seems very blasé and everyday to me. He doesn't seem to have the grandeur that
Anthony
Hopkins brings to the role.
He created that character essentially. He's you think of Hannibal Lecter, you think of Anthony Hopkins, of course.
Yeah, I can't read the books without it being him, and he really does fit what the book says. Like, the book says, the first time he shows up. In fact, this is his first appearance, right? He shows up in this before. This is a few years before Silence of the Lambs, but he's described as a small, sleek-looking man or something like that, with bright, darting eyes or something like that. And I'm like, that's Anthony Hopkins, at least when he was that age.
Brian Cox,
yeah.
So what in that book series? Which one is the best? Would you say Red Dragon?
It's my favorite. I don't know if it's the best, but it's my favorite. And I've talked about this before, probably on the Sausage Factory and stuff, but I'm sure people don't remember, or the same people are watching. But I like Clarice Starling a lot. She's a good character. I root for her and stuff. But I really like Will more. And the main reason is I like how he handles Lecter. Will doesn't put up with any of Lecter's bullshit. he's never at any point emotionally manipulated by him. And Lecter tries. And there's one point where he's like, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And he's just like, "Try to persuade me then, Will." He's like, "I'm not going to persuade you. Either you'll do it or you won't." Like, he doesn't, like, this is a guy that's already been nearly killed by Lecter. Like, in the catching him, Lecter stabbed him several times. And it really messed up his life. So he's afraid of Lecter, but he still faces him down. I just really like how Will deals with him. And you understand why. He's been through the experience. He's an older guy, whereas Clarice Starling is a very young, inexperienced FBI agent. So it's not a flaw. It's not like a problem. But where she's really afraid. She really gets sucked in by Lecter. He really gets to play head games with her and really get to her and emotionally mess her up. I just prefer Will, how he can just like handle him. In the show, I like the show, and I'll have to revisit that because it's neat. Because they just take the events of this and the other, and Hannibal and Silence of the Lambs, and just sort of mix them all together and screw with the timeline. It's kind of interesting how they do it. But man, they make Will absolutely insane in that. Like, he's batshit crazy. Like, there's whole scenes of the actor who plays him just like wigging out, like seriously, like you think his eyes are gonna pop out like Beetlejuice or something like that at some points. Like, he is losing his mind in that show. It's entertaining though. I like to revisit it. I like the show. It's interesting. I think the director or whatever even described it as sort of like a mixtape of the three books, because it is. It takes the events of three books and just sort of shuffles them around and puts them in a different order. Because at one point, the furthest I watched, what's the name of that? I can't remember the name. Verger. Yeah, so Verger, the crazy billionaire that Lecter had almost killed, but didn't kill. He really crippled him, and he's like, this total sick psycho who likes to, he can't molest children anymore, but now he likes to just like emotionally scar them or like that. So they have him pre that, so they have him young and whole, and his sister, but well before anything with Dollarhide. So yeah, they mix it all up. I don't mind. They're trying to do a fresh take, so it's kind of interesting. So I don't know. I'd like to revisit. It's kind of interesting, and of course they really make what's his name really important. The FBI guy.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, and they make him Fishburne in this, and man, they make him involved. He's really involved, like way more than he was in any of the books or movies. Like, he's front and center in this.
Yeah, I think I saw maybe the whole first season, and they did 2 seasons. Is that right, or 3?
They were well into 3. I was at the start of 3 when I stopped.
Okay, so
that's when like the Mason Verger stuff started happening, and at that, yeah, I kept waiting. I was like, okay, so when is Dollarhide stuff gonna happen? Like, and it kept not happening.
So
I'm like, it's Will. It's weird. Will is the main character of this book, and yet nothing from this book they've gotten to yet. In fact, they've taken Will and jumped him over and put him into stuff that happened after, in the books, after Silence of the Lambs. And of course, there's no hint of Clarice Starling at all in any of this. So it's really interesting. I don't mind. I was just like, when are we going to get to it? One thing that's kind of nice about it is, in this book, it's only in flashback where they talk about the first killer that he dealt with, the Minnesota Shrike or whatever, how he caught him first, and what happened there, and how like Shrike, when he confronted him, Shrike had his wife hostage with a knife, and he's like slashed her throat and stuff, and Will had to take him down and shoot him and stuff. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he killed him. I think Will killed him is how it went. Anyway, it's only just talked about in flashback in this. They show a lot of it in the first season of the other one. Remember? There's this whole thing about Shrike's daughter, and she survives, but it's clear that she's just like her father. Like, she's actually like going to be a killer too and stuff. It's all coming back to me. I haven't seen it in a couple of years. But I should revisit, because I did like it. It was interesting.
I remember people being really pissed off that they didn't make more, or someone else didn't pick it up because it was like Fox or NBC or someone that it did come on.
I was going to say, this is the other thing that totally shocked me, is the level of violence on the show is astounding, considering it's not like HBO or anything like that. Like, the very first episode I saw was just on normal TV, like not a special channel.
Like normal times, too.
Yeah, and it's showing like that episode, like in the first season, where like that killer is like, I don't know, dumping all the bodies like in a silo. Man, they're all like fused together, and there's like a skins being. And at one point, remember, he like kidnaps Will or something, and Will wakes up and he's like fused to them, like he's
Oh,
stitched
wow.
to them or something. Like there's a whole scene where he has to like rip himself off and like his
Oh,
skin
wow.
gets ripped, and that's all shown. I'm like, oh my god! And the whole funny thing about it being network TV is the corpses are all nude, but anytime there's going to be a breast or a shot of like the crotch, there's just a perfect amount of shadow to cover it. You know, they're showing excruciating, horrific violence, but not a breast. You know,
Oh God, no! That would kill the moral fabric of this country.
absolutely. But
Um,
yeah, yeah, just the level of graphic violence they showed on that show astounded me, considering it was not like an HBO or show
yeah,
like that. It was a show, you know, that came on normal channels with commercials and stuff. I couldn't believe it.
yeah. It's the episodes of that show would have probably been hard pressed to get an R rating like 20 years earlier. You know, it's like they may have had to cut stuff to get an R rating. That's how things have changed so much.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it, but you know, parents really need to pay attention to the ratings of shows.
Yeah, it's not too hard. Like it's not. I don't think it's asking parents too much. I understand
I
parents are
mean,
busy and stuff like that, but it's not. I don't think it's asking too much.
I've been watching, you know, some horror movies with my kids lately, and like we watched The Lost Boys the other day, and it's like that movie's tame and it's R rated, but they you know it's like a few times they say you know fuck or shit or
Mm.
something, and that's it. I mean, there's really no sex in it. There's no graphic violence really. I mean,
No, no, the violence is almost cartoonish.
it's yeah, it is, and I mean that would get like
Love that
PG
movie, but you
13.
know, it's not what you would think of as like a serious horror movie, right? Like it's a horror, almost comedy, kind of fun. Like as you say, it's one you could watch with your kids of a certain age, you know, whereas others, you know, would absolutely not be appropriate.
Oh yeah, we've watched all kinds of stuff that is you know hard R stuff, but it's not you know there's really nothing there. It's like you watch a PG-13 movie now, it's will probably be worse than the horror movies of the '80s.
Yeah,
Which I sound like a terrible parent, but it's like I mean
no,
not
you know these
showing
movies.
it's
You know
not
what, you
showing
know what's in them.
anything.
I
Yeah, I mean
mean,
I know what you know. Like
I
okay, we're
mean,
not going to watch Hellraiser tonight.
yeah,
Okay, we'll
exactly.
save that for
When
another.
see, a terrible parent is the one that doesn't know. It's just like I don't know. Here, watch it. But you know, I mean, that's why you know it was okay to watch with them. You knew what
Right.
they could handle.
Hmm.
You know, so you're involved, which is good.
We watched Pet Cemetery 2 the other night, which is just an awesome movie. So bad it's good type movie. But
I only remember parts of it.
there's one weird sex scene where the dad has sex with the mom that turns into the dog, and I knew when that was coming, so I like you know bumped it forward past that. So
Mm.
it's really bizarre. It's amazing that you know Mary Lambert directed that one also.
The main thing I remember about that movie is there's a part where they're in somebody's house and there's a hockey game on in the background, and there's this and the play-by-play guy. It's real. It's real footage.
Hmm.
It's like from like 1990 or two or whatever like that from back then. And I recognize the voice as one of the American announcers that's on one of the American networks that sometimes like NBC or something. Like I was like, he did games even back then. Like I didn't even sound that old. Like I can't remember his name, but he's the guy. He's the guy who goes, Ovechkin fires and scores. Anyway, I was like, yeah, it was just some game in the background. I recognized his voice. I was like, shit, he was doing it back then. Because he doesn't. I never thought he was that old. I can't remember his name. I can't even. I mean, coverage. They'd say weird things. Maybe like that's offsides. I'm like, offside. There's no S. What are you doing? And they would say odd things.
That movie was filmed in Georgia.
I also remember there's a part where some bullies are like threatening a cat or something, and it made me really mad.
Yeah, that's kind of. I mean, yeah,
I don't think they were serious about it, but they were still threatening it.
they didn't kill the cat. They actually put it in a cage in the pet cemetery. But just it's so funny. It's the kid from Big. It was Tom Hanks's friend from the movie Big. He's like, this is Big was what 88. This was 92. So he's like 5 years older than Eddie Furlong, in real life,
Yeah.
and a super asshole.
Yeah. That's all I really remember. I remember that scene, and I remember some hockey in the background. I can't remember anything else. I need to watch it start to finish again. Because it's an interesting sort of sequel, for one of those sequels that's just written out of thin air, right? Like, most of those are usually really bad. You have like you have a book or whatever. You make a movie based on it. Maybe it's pretty good, and then they make like 10 sequels that have nothing to do with anything, like in Children of the Corn and stuff like that. Like who cares? And it's funny. I have been like reading about the Hellraiser series that I've been so hard on recently, and it's true. Like about half of the Hellraisers weren't even written as Hellraisers.
No,
they were just written as completely different other movies, and then they slapped the Hellraiser name on it, and then just incorporated a few minor things into the plot to make it fit. Because as we said, like Dimension, several times, Dimension just made a shit movie just so they could keep the license. Like they were going to lose the rights to it. And they're like, oh, we better make a movie and that'll renew it. And that's why like at least 2 or 3 of those came out. I think I'm going to watch like all of them because I never bothered.
Oh man, good luck.
It's funny, a lot of people think like yeah, you're right, because a lot of people actually say, Bloodlines was the last one that was directly based on the series. Wasn't something else. It was actually supposed to be that. And actually had some at least very small, tepid ties to Barker. Like Barker had some sort of small involvement in it. Maybe just as a associate producer or something like that. After that, he's had nothing to do with any of the movies. Now, and I hate Bloodlines with a passion. I think it's awful. So if people are saying it gets worse after that, I can't imagine. Now, I have read that Bloodlines, it's maybe not its own fault, that maybe it would have been a better movie. It was a movie that was really messed up by executive meddling. It made the director really pissed off. Apparently, the studio or whoever just like ripped it apart and made him change a bunch of things and cut things out. So maybe originally it would have been a really good movie.
Mm-hmm.
All I know is, like I said, like I remember Pizzell and some other people standing up for it and saying it's actually a pretty good movie. I'm thinking, oh, it's god awful. So if it gets worse after that, like maybe
you talking about Bloodlines? Oh, Bloodlines is fucking terrible.
Yeah, I
saw it in the theater too, and I hated it then.
It's the last one to have a theatrical release. Okay, but I've heard like I don't know. What's funny is, how come 2 came out in the same year?
Did it?
Yeah, hold on. I'll just.
I think it can't be right. Something's up with that. It was really soon after, but I don't think it was the same year.
I've got that it was 2005. That Deader and Hellworld came out both in 2005.
Oh, you're talking about okay. Fuck, they can churn those out. I guess I thought you meant Hellraiser 2.
I've seen Hellraiser 2. I've seen the first 3. And I've seen most of Bloodlines. So I guess Bloodlines is 4. So I've seen almost the first 4. Then I've seen like nothing of the others except for really small snatches and stuff. And all I've heard is, you might as well avoid them because they're garbage.
There was one in there. I can't remember the stupid tacked on titles, but someone recommended it to me, and it was actually like a true crime detective story.
That's Inferno.
Yeah, that one. They said, "Oh man, I know people say it's terrible, but you got to watch it." That movie was a struggle to watch. Like really. That
was the first one that was written as something else that they just made into Hellraiser. I'm looking at the franchise now, so that was
not good.
So that was 2000. Then it was in 2002 Hellseeker, which I know nothing about. But then Deader and Hellworld both came out in 2005. Hellworld has Lance Henriksen in it.
Oh, it's gonna be good.
Yeah. What's funny is so the latest film that came out was Judgment. But what's weird is and there was a big gap between that one and the one before. Revelations was 2011, so there's a big gap. And a big reason why it got held up was because of the Harvey Weinstein stuff.
Back then?
I guess not all the way back then. Although, actually, what's funny is not Harvey himself, but Bob was a big problem with just the movies being what they were, and that Bob would constantly say, "No, make it more mainstream. No, make it more mainstream." It was Bob that would, cut apart these movies. They'd be like this, and he'd be like, "No, I need this to appeal to like a wider audience."
That doesn't surprise me one bit that they
Well,
said that.
That's the Weinstein's main functions. They're not,
But
they just use movies as commodities. Like, do whatever you can to make it more commercial and more mainstream. That was their job.
Clive Barker, The Hellbound Heart, is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, man. It's like sexual and demented and horrific. It's that's awful shit.
Wheelhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I enjoy it. I think it's really cool, but the the average soccer mom is probably not going to get a kick out of it.
But no, in reading some of these, it was always that it would go to Bob Weinstein, and he'd be like, "You got to change that. You got to cut that. Blah 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 blah." And it was always with that in mind. Make this more audience friendly. It's like the whole point is it's supposed to repel the average person.
Yeah.
It's supposed to freak them out and make them upset and appeal to that small thing of horror fans that go for that. It's like, oh yeah, I like that stuff that puts you out of your comfort zones like that. But yeah, I even in all the reading I've done, I found no explanation why 2 came out in the same year. It's really weird.
You know how that those dates are. They're not always, but I mean, they're video releases. You think they would be right. It's not like.
But anyway, a point I was going to make that I jumped off of when I started talking about the Weinsteins was, what's funny is so the 9th one came out in 2011, and then stuff didn't happen for years. Around 2013, they were talking, as early as 2013, they've been talking about actually doing a remake, and it just never happened. And to this day, it's still something that might happen. But in the meantime, somewhat recently, Judgment came out in early 2018, which a lot of people thought was going to be that reboot, reimagining or whatever, but it's not. But people thought it was because it has sort of a different look to it, and because it has a different guy as Pinhead.
That was really the mark, of when it was not the same when they replaced Doug Bradley.
Yeah,
that's part.
Because what it was Revelations was written by this guy that. What's funny is as early as the second one, there was an FX artist called Gary Tunnicliffe, and he actually wound up writing the script for Revelations, and he was supposed to direct it, but because of a scheduling conflict, he had something else. He didn't get to direct it, and he claims that because of that, the movie got ripped apart, and it wasn't anything close to what he'd written, and he got mad. Judgment is the one that he wrote and directed, so I don't know. I don't know if that turned out the way he wanted or not. But once again, some scenes were deemed too graphic by the studio and were self-censored, so it also had cut stuff. And at that point, so this is the second time that Bradley wasn't in the role, but Tunnicliffe himself actually asked Bradley to come back, and he said no.
He's got too many convention appearances. You don't have time for that shit.
Yeah. I mean, Doug Bradley's good in the role, but I don't know. That's something I can't relate to when some of these people talk about going to conventions and stuff like that. It's not that big a deal to me. I'm not going to be starstruck by the guy that played Pinhead. It's not an iconic role to me. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's kind of cool if I can meet him, but it's not get out to Horror Fest, blah, 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 because Doug Bradley's going to be there. I don't know, man.
It's not really a series that I'm particularly that interested in. For one, I really liked the first movie, and I've got an autographed poster by the Bradley and all the other Cenobites. But
well, the thing is that makes me sad is, and I forgot to mention this point, was when I talked about as early as 2013 when they were talking about a reboot remake. The only thing, why would I be interested in that? Those are shit. The point was it was going to actually be written and have lots of involvement by Barker again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what sounds interesting. But anyway, it hasn't happened, and now in this last year, we've had another one come out, but it has nothing to do with any of that.
So you're saying another one came out, but it wasn't a reboot?
Right. There's still no reboot. As early as Revelations came out in 2011, and then as early as 2013, they were talking about a reboot. and 5 years have gone by, and nothing's happened on that front. And finally, a new one's come out, but it's not that. Barker's had nothing to do with it. It's yeah. So,
I
but
would rather them not do a reboot. I mean, why would Clive Barker come out of the woodwork to do that? I mean, I thought he was pretty much done with film.
maybe I don't know.
Clive Barker, man, is like an artistic genius. Like
Oh, he's amazing.
people just don't understand how.
I hate the
I
fact
mean,
that he can paint too. It's not
I
fair.
know,
I always hate
you
people that can write and draw, and I come across them a lot because I'm a comic book reader. I'm like, that's not fair. Like, you can do both. Like, come on. Like, I'm reading Clive Barker's books and I'm looking at his beautiful paintings.
yeah,
I'm like, oh, fuck you, man.
it's
You
just
can't have
really.
all the talent.
But I think it was like studios he didn't like dealing with. Because they chopped up his. What was that other movie he did with Cronenberg? Was actually a star in it.
Oh man, this remake saga stretches back even further than I thought. In October 2006, Barker announced through his website he'd be writing the script to a forthcoming remake to be produced by Dimension. French director Pascal Laugier was set to direct the film, but then he left because of creative differences. Something about Laugier. Yeah, Laugier wanted his film to be a very serious take, whereas the producers, Weinstein's, wanted the film to be more commercial and appeal to a teen audience.
That's why
Now,
that didn't work. Okay.
now we jump ahead to January 2010. Camelot Entertainment Group announced that the distributor was working on Unearthed, the Hellraiser saga, a documentary of the franchise. That never came to fruition. October 2010, it was announced that Patrick Lussier and Todd Farmer were to direct and write respectively a reboot of Hellraiser. However, in 2011, it was confirmed that they were dropped from the project. Now, here's what I'd heard of. October 2013, Clive Barker announced that he'd be writing and directing the film, and Doug Bradley was going to return and everything. And he said that the next year, in October 2014, that there was a draft he was working on, blah blah blah. And then, but at that point, he was saying he might not direct it, and now nothing for 3 years. And then in March of 2017, Barker said that the film's script was written and delivered to Dimension years ago. That was the last of anyone heard of, until news of the sequel surfaced. So it could still happen. As recently as last year, I don't know. Apparently, they just ignored whatever Barker submitted and were like, "Yeah, let's go with this movie instead."
Yeah, it was
So,
the director of Martyrs.
yeah,
And
that's who the French guy is. Yeah,
and that's like that sounds cool.
yeah,
Why didn't you do that?
yeah. That's what I don't. That's what I don't understand. You read a lot of these things. It's like, oh, there's some names of some actual talented people, and it's like, and here's what actually happened. Some shit, movie came out, done by nobodies.
Right.
Like that. That's what the studio decided they wanted instead. It's hard. Like, is it a money issue? I don't know. Like,
I mean, a lot of those French guys really just can't get any traction here in the States because of studios.
yeah,
They want to come here
make it more mainstream, make it more commercial, blah 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 blah.
like the guys that did, High Tension,
Yeah, I love that movie.
Inside, Martyrs. They've gotten attached to some really cool projects, but they don't ever go anywhere. Like,
Isn't it funny? That always seems to be like how it works with things in the creative world. So
like,
either independently or maybe just over in your own country where they do something, you produce something that's really good, and it's so good that it gets recognized over here in North America. And the people in North America say, "Oh, we really like that. That was great. You should come over here and do stuff for us." And they're like, "We'd love to." And then they do the same stuff that they did that made them successful in the first place. And then the people over here say, "No, you can't do that." Like, well, why were you interested in the first place? You know
right.
what kind of work I do, and now you're censoring it and telling me that it doesn't work out. Like, you want the name, but you don't want the actual what I actually bring to the table.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Like it's like, oh, you made a successful movie. Okay, that's great. That's name recognition. We can use that. It's like, did you watch the movie that I'm famous for? No, we just know it was successful. Like, because this is how I do things. It's like, and doesn't that prove that it will work again? Then they're like, no way.
That French horror boom about what is it, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was like I really got on board for horror again, and it's like I just wish those guys would just keep making movies over there. It's like, hell, keep them where you keep doing what you're doing, man. You don't want to come over here.
Yeah, we can watch them with subtitles. It's okay.
I
You
would
don't need to
probably
come
rather
over
that.
here and you
Yeah.
don't need to come over here and cast whatever teen bopper person is
Mm-hmm.
popular right now and
Well,
go through all that shit.
you're going to listen to people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about, try to tell you how to, make your movie.
Yeah.
We need more fresh faced teens in this. Like,
What's really weird is like Judgment got delayed a few times. Yeah, and that's because of so it was Judgment got delayed a bunch of times because of the Harvey Weinstein situation. It was going to be released in 2017 with minimal marketing to avoid negative publicity, temporarily shelved. Then the whole thing about blah 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 blah. Then distributed by Lionsgate and finally came out in February 2018. And as usual, people said it was no good, which is which is what people have been saying about Hellraiser movies for 20 years.
so does because Dimension. I don't think the Weinsteins own Dimension anymore. They own. They have the Weinstein Company. I think is their company now, or was. I don't know what's going on with them, but
They were still obviously attached in some way because that's how it affected Judgment's had a delayed release. Um, I guess it's because even if they're not attached, he's still a co-founder. He's still one of the co-founders of Dimension, even if he's not attached to them anymore. I guess.
so they gave it like a really soft release because of all of his allegations.
Yeah, that's what it says. It was delayed, and then it was just given a soft release. I don't know. It's funny. I say like, and that's what people are saying. At least Hellraiser was never really a high concept thing anyway. But I was saying it's funny. I'm going to. I didn't plan on it, but on Thursday I'm going to go see the Predator movie because Ryan asked me to go see it, and I was like, yeah, sure, we'll go together because we haven't seen a movie together in forever. But I had no plans to see it, and I'm just thinking it's funny. Like when I look at these franchises like Terminator, Aliens, Predator, we keep going to them, and they haven't been good in like 25 years. Like,
I know.
is this the movie that's going to turn things around? It's
No.
not. Like,
No.
it's done. Like, it was a great franchise. Well, it lasted for maybe 2-3 movies tops, and then that's it. You can't just keep milking it.
Well, I think the story is there. I mean, if you can get some competent writers to flesh out that, because I mean, there's all sorts of comic books and stuff about the lore out there. If you
Sure.
just get that into a script and then have somebody competent direct it.
Never seems to work that way. I mean, it seemed like the last Alien movie had like the ingredients to be good, and it in no way was.
Well, I mean, like I think Predator 2 is okay because
I think Predator 2 is good too.
they didn't really change it that much,
But that's 1990, is what I'm saying.
Sure.
I thought Predator 2 is really, in fact, I think it's a super underrated sequel because a lot of people think there's a big drop off between Predator and Predator 2, whereas I think they're very close.
Yeah.
That's not the popular sentiment. But again, that's 1990, man.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I understand that, but like I was going to say, I think Predator 2 is good, but then, Predator is the next movie in that franchise. Like they changed everything. They took them to another planet, and dropped them on just make it set on Earth. We don't need any of that. Just tell the same story in a different format,
Yeah. That's all you're allowed to do with something like that. Because, I mean, these aren't high concept movies. It's not about, it's not telling a super intricate story or, crazy character development. It's about, these creatures in this environment versus humans type thing. And yet they still fuck it up. Like the 2 Alien versus Predator movies are garbage.
Yeah. That's like, Alien Covenant, like how did.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The last Alien Covenant, like I was mildly excited about it because the stuff I read was encouraging. And no.
Fuck it. I don't know what. I think Ridley Scott's lost his mind.
Well, yeah, it was clear once you watch that one that he was really trying to do it to like validate
Prometheus.
The other Prometheus. And he's
Well,
like,
it was like a fuck you to the fans.
Yeah,
like now they are connected, like, motherfucker.
Yeah, it's like you didn't like. What's funny is I actually kind of like Prometheus. I kind of enjoy it.
I do too.
I get what's wrong with it, but I still kind of enjoy it anyway. I actually own it, which is kind of weird.
Well, that's what I said. I like Prometheus when it wasn't connected to the Alien franchise. When you try to connect them, I don't like it. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
They're two separate worlds, in my opinion. But hell, he's trying to connect Aliens, Prometheus, and fucking Blade Runner all together. So who
Yeah, no
knows?
thanks.
This
No
guy's
thanks.
crazy. And I mean, just imagine if he had done the new Blade Runner film. I mean, it would have been a mess.
Probably.
So, but anyway, I wanted to say I
Anyway,
saw this really cool film from Poland. I don't think I've ever seen a Polish film before, but it's called The Lure. The Lure from
oh, the mermaid
2015.
film.
Yeah, have you heard of it?
Yeah, I saw. I don't remember what the hell I went to see. I went to see something a few years ago. It must have been something Fringe or something, and they had
Mm.
a long preview for it.
It
Yeah,
was
it's like
really cool, man.
like Killer Mermaids.
Yeah, kill it. But it's like a musical, and it's set in the '80s. It's just
Okay, I somehow forgot that part.
really, really interesting film. I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah, that was
Just
a movie. I remember just being pretty interested. It's not the typical thing you see as a preview in the theater. So, I mean, I was certainly interested at the time. I guess I just forgot about it. But it's funny. I forgot. I can't even remember that it was a musical. Obviously, I'm sure they played that up in the preview. I'm sure they would have. And yet I forgot that detail. So that's quite different. So the songs are in Polish.
Mm-hmm. Lots of really music's really well done too, but lots of like '80s synth stuff in there.
Symphonic stuff. Yeah, cool.
It's cool, man. I was kind of blown away by it, to tell you the truth, because I was like, mermaids, it's Polish. Okay, I'll check it out. And really, really enjoyed it.
Cool.
It was just so different, I've been stuck in a rut with stuff.
Yeah, that happens.
But
that goes.
I can't think of another Polish movie. You think of any Polish movies?
No. I think the only Polish movie I ever saw was probably some Holocaust documentary.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense, Poland, because I know Polish people don't like being associated with that. Like, there's a lot more to our country than that. I know that, Poland.
Yeah. Can't, argue with the fact that you had 10 camps in your country.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm not blaming the Polish people for it. Although it is true, if you want to really get into it, that there were plenty of Poles that were kind of complicit in it. Not that maybe they knew everything, Yeah. Not saying they knew everything. It is a fact there were plenty of native Poles that willingly, turned over Jewish citizens to the Nazis.
I mean, what are you going to do, in that situation? I mean, hell, if you don't, they probably kill you. If you knew about it, didn't tell.
I'm sure that's how a lot of them felt. Mm-hmm. But also, some of them did it because they specifically didn't like the Jews, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody brought it further than the Nazis, but they didn't invent anti-Semitism. That's enough sticking up for the Nazis, I think. But anyway, Poland, yeah. Yeah, the Nazis weren't that bad, and neither was Dahmer. That's what I wanted to say. No.
Yeah, Dahmer's very, very emotional serial killer.
I would say if I had to name one that I found somewhat sympathetic, it would be him. That's all I'm saying. In a certain context, as like that, where he's like a guy where I feel like he was more like sick than like evil, I guess.
There was a lady who lived in this building. She was like, I used to go to his place and drink beer all the time. And he was real nice. He would always give me stuff. He'd always make me sandwiches. And she's like, what was in those
really
sandwiches?
Sociable guy. Oh, God. I mean, yeah, you'd be wondering that, the rest of your life. Jesus Christ, I ate in that apartment.
I ate human flesh.
Yeah. Like, even if you didn't, like, just to think that you ate in there.
Yeah, that you ate near that. Or hell, you'd live 20 feet away.
Yeah, how do you shake that off?
I don't think they can. They tore that place down.
Yeah, at least they did that much. But I mean, still, the people have to live with the fact that they lived it. They lived it for a while. Pretty awful. Anyway, I guess we can finish up. Yeah, I don't think we're going to do the remake next week. I don't think it's really worthy of it, to tell you the truth. It would mostly just be us bashing it and saying how much this one is better, I think. So something different next week. As I said, we don't know quite yet, but we'll try to keep with probably horror / thriller type stuff leading up to Halloween, as it is that time of year. So why not? So we have a few things that we thought of. This is one that was in the earliest stages as us coming up with the show. I think this was on like maybe one of the first lists we threw out of when we said we wanted to do some different kind of films that we've gotten a chance to talk about on other shows. This was one that came up right away. So it's good to get to it. Not a super deep film, but just a really, really effective one. Just and a different sort of approach, especially at the time. Maybe some other movies have come out that have kind of copy it a little bit. And some of it, I think, that Robin Williams movie, 1 Hour Photo, reminds me of it a little bit. Once again, you have like it's sort of very banal type real world. The guy's not really supposed that scary or anything, but lurking underneath, he's got the I think you get a bit of that vibe from this, and I think this movie probably contributed to that. But it still is fairly unique in its approach, and that usually when we're dealing with movies that have bad guys and serial killers and villains, well, villain really comes up. It's more, it's more theatrical or whatever you want to say, less realistic, which is fine. It's fun. I enjoy that. As I said, I love a killer like John Doe in Seven, or as we talked today, Hannibal Lecter. I love that stuff. But it is good to see sort of the flip side and maybe the more realistic side, in that you take this killer Raymond and you realize he could be a real guy. And that there's probably some real guys out there right now that are very similar to him, and have maybe even done similar things. So I can totally understand why when people, I've read comments on the internet and people talking about how much this movie disturbed them or how chilling they found the movie. And I think that's really why, because you just realize how close to reality it is, how it's a pretty good representation of it. That the world is a dark and scary place, but also in a very sneaky kind of way. In that, there's nothing obvious about this guy. He's just. They even in the movie itself, there's a part, remember, where they have a TV program that he's watching, where they're talking about the abduction and stuff. They have some footage of the people there that day, and like the TV host said something like, there could be a killer in this crowd or something like that, which is kind of the whole vibe you get from the movie. It's like, you go to some place and there's a whole bunch of people. Maybe one of them is a killer. You don't know. It's creepy. The other thing I'll say about this is not really related. Isn't it funny? Like, this is a movie, so it's in 1988 and in France. And yet, to me, at least in my own experience, it's like all those rest stop areas look the same. I've been to many rest stop areas throughout Canada and the U.S., and they all look pretty much like that one. Unless they have like some specific landmark or monument by them, there's not really much to differentiate them. And even though it's 30 years on, and there's some technology has changed, it's still very similar. You go into the store, the layout and stuff, the pop machine or coffee machine, where the bathrooms are. So yeah, I've never been to France or anything, but that looks a lot like lots of places I've been. Those places really have a sameness to them, and they all kind of blur together. But as I said, when we figure out what next week's will be, we'll announce. Hopefully, we'll give you a little bit of a better heads up than we've been doing lately. Maybe give you a chance to be able to watch it beforehand, because I know it's kind of annoying when we maybe just spring one on you and talk about it. So hopefully in the next few days we'll work it out. It'll be a little easier because, as I said, this isn't a series, but we have at least sort of a theme going in that we're doing kind of horror thriller type movies until Halloween. So we will narrow down some of the stuff that we've listed before and figure it out. And as I said, we will let you know. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I think that'll do for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us when we had a bit of a later start. So that's Jay. I'm Cole. We thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon from the Baka Dimension. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.